All right, we're live, everybody. For those of you that didn't catch the countdown, this is 3 of 4 episodes with technical difficulties, but I finally got it underway, so people are probably going to be flowing into the chat very soon here. But I'm excited for the episode that I have this week because this is one of the guys in the industry that, in all honesty, I feel like from an energy standpoint, from a take standpoint, philosophy standpoint, I really am in lockstep with more times than not. And that is Mr. Jax Falcone. You can find him on Twitter at Dino Game Theory. What is happening, sir?
Oh, it's all happening. I mean, I just found out there are flying cars. I am over the moon with this information.
Yeah, this is look, I didn't want to tell you how hyper technologically advanced Seattle actually is, but clearly, as you can see outside the window, we are levels beyond wherever it is that you're probably from. Where are you from currently?
1942.
Perfect. So I know we are. I know that's an absolute fact. The reality is my daughter really wanted to see flying cars in the video. I was just going to do a cityscape with colors and all that stuff. And sure enough, she's like, "Can you do flying cars?" I was like, "I don't know. Let's find out." So boom, flying cars have been brought in, man. And it's a great intro. It's a great intro. Is it not?
Just more proof that this generation of children are spoiled brats. I mean, you're just making flying cars for your daughter for no good reason. Unbelievable.
No, maybe that means I'm a great father and she's not a spoiled brat, sir, right? I'm going for Father of the Year in September.
Yeah, Father of the Year. Invent flying cars because your daughter needed them. And don't share it with the rest of the world. Just keep it to you and your family. That's just selfish.
Well, how can I be driving the cars if I'm sitting here?
I don't know. This is all confusing. Let's get to it.
Okay. So listen, man, I wanted to get into a couple things. I kind of want to give people the backstory. So you are a part of the Undroppables. What is your role with the Undroppables? And let people know what the Undroppables actually is.
Yeah, I mean, the Undroppables is a collaborative effort. And, I myself, Chalk, and Tommy Moe are the 3 partners and owners. But moreover than that, we definitely share some of the stake of the company with every member. Everybody's basically, bought into the company and really at the end of the day, it was a platform for people to get their start, including us. We started at grassroots and, so yeah, it's a lot of fun. We each kind of have our role. I mean, I do the Undrafted podcast, which is kind of the big thing that I do. But everybody does something. We have someone who does offensive line rankings and offensive line breakdowns, Brad Wire. We have, we've Edwin Porras, Adam Hutchinson. Those doctors started with the Undroppables, and now they're off to bigger and better things. So we're just an opportunity for people to kind of get their feet wet and show what they can do. And it's a lot of fun to watch people, start with us and then grow elsewhere. It's really cool. So we have a lot of fun with it.
You guys are like a farm team in a lot of ways, but maybe better than that, but definitely with all these guys. I mean, that's how a lot of us got starts too. I don't know where kind of you got your start, if it was directly with this group that you're with now. As you heard last week, Danny Kelly from Field Goals was one of my big starts. Believe it or not, Chad Parsons from Under the Helmet gave me writing opportunities way back in the day. So, it's kind of funny to see where people came from. How did you get integrated into this industry?
Super interesting for me because when I got into the industry, I didn't mean it. I didn't want to do this. I wasn't trying to do this. I actually was coming here to find people like me and you.
Yeah.
To Twitter. I was like, hey man, I need to know about Dynasty because I'd played regular, fantasy football for years. And I said, well, there's not a lot of information on Dynasty specifically. Where do I go? And I kind of went to Twitter, heard there was some things going on there. So I kind of got in the streets. And as I got in the streets, I would Twitter's funny like that. I would just sort of be communicating here or there. And all of a sudden I'm communicating with like Evan Silva or JJ Zacharyson. And they would sort of reach out and be like, hey man, you've got something to offer. And I'm like, what? I didn't realize that was true. And so then you start to, sort of hang out with your contemporaries. And that was, for me, that was Chalk and Mike Liu and even Ray G, who blew up. A lot of us would just sort of be in there, Drew Oshensky and all these people who kind of were, just sort of finding their way. And then all of a sudden, I think people, if they respect what you have to say, you get more followers and you're sort of asked to be on shows. And I was like, sure. And so I sort of started with Alex Johnson at Yards Per. he had started a website that I thought was kind of a cool idea. So I helped him get it off the ground. I wrote for him. I did rankings and just sort of did some stuff and helped him get it going. And he's doing a pretty good job over at Yards Per. But soon thereafter, I kind of got with Chalk, and here we are.
Yeah, do your own thing. It's really funny because my story is not so dissimilar from yours. I came here just to find fantasy analysis and find like-minded people because I was on Twitter back in the day, and I was more in this Twitter sphere where it was like one-liners and comedians, and I was doing jokes. And then I found myself in this fantasy football
Your
realm.
true calling.
Yeah, my true calling, right? My people, right? This is what we do. Yeah. And then I found myself like always with this love for fantasy football since way back when. And I didn't come here to create content. It was never in my mind whatsoever. And I love what you said. You'd have a couple of takes and people would go, wow, that's a good perspective. Have you ever thought about writing? And it's these guys kind of like you're saying, or Chad Parsons was to me, because I listened to him early on and I thought it was so cool to hear him on a podcast and, you're interacting with this guy. It's not like Michael Jordan, the second best basketball player in the world. If I wanted to talk to him, it would be an impossibility. But as a fan of fantasy football content, I can very easily, sorry, I got myself there. I can very easily reach out to these people, please. Right? Like I think that's one of the coolest things about it. I don't think that there's superstardom in this industry by any means, on a level, comparative to true athletes or movie stars or whatever. But I think it's so cool that these guys are accessible and always have been. Guys like JJ, like you said, guys like Evan. It's just been amazing that even when you had 20 followers, those guys would respond to you.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I will. This will be the last time I kiss your ass on the show, so listen close. Because it's over after this. But truth is that the show you did with Matt was definitely the show that gave me inspiration to start my own show. And that show was the sort of positive inspiration. And then there are like tens or hundreds of shitty podcasts. I was like, I know for a fact I'm better than all that. And I wasn't sure if I was even close to what you guys were doing. I really thought you guys were the best in the business. I love what you did. I've told you this before in private, but I'll say it here on the air so people can hear it. But I just thought you and Matt had such a great chemistry. I thought you did a great job of balancing, your sort of on-air personality with his. You're great. Yeah. And then you were so kind to be on my show, and I love talking with you. I think you say we have a lot of similar takes, but also similar sensibilities and sense of humor and stuff like that. So you were one of the people that sort of by proxy just inspired me to do this. So there you go. And that's it.
I appreciate it, man.
It's just all fire coming at you.
Well, you can kiss my ass anytime, but I do want to say I honestly do appreciate that. It's really a weird thing for me. I've had a couple of guests over the years, features, or just people I've talked to where they're big guys. Even guys like Ray, told me that I was somebody that they looked up to early on. And I see these guys like ascend to these crazy levels. So it's kind of odd to be considered sort of one of the early people, maybe in this kind of the Dynasty world. But man, it's always cool. I try to this day, help people out, help, writers, content producers, whoever it is, because the reality is there's no secrets to this. If you keep working hard, if you keep creating content, if you find something original to lean into, all these things are going to help you be successful in the industry. And even to this day, I'm trying to find writers just to give people opportunity, because like that's where it starts. Getting on the mic is fucking hard. Whether people know this or not.
It's very hard.
It's not words on a page where I can go, so-and-so is going to have a bad year. Never mind. Delete. No, when you say it on the mic, it's like that shit is embedded for a long time, and so you have to be able to defend things in real time. And so,
well, the hardest one is like, I don't. It's been a long time for you, but I remember and it's not the first time I guested on a podcast, because when you guest, it's like you just kind of sit back and play off someone. But the first time I did my show, and I pressed record, I was like, oh shit! Like I had no idea what to do. I was like, really. It was crazy because I had guested a few times because people were like, hey, come on. And I was like, man, I'm pretty good at this. Like, I make people laugh. People like me. And I was like, that's fun. And then I did my own show and I was like, like, what do you say? How do you do this? What am I doing? And so what's your voice? That's really hard. So that was the hardest part. And, that it's very exciting. So for me, it was very exciting to try and become something, I guess. I don't know what the hell that means, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I think you found it too. I think, and this is one of the reasons why I think your style has always resonated with me, because you can be chippy, you can be humorous, you can be creative, you find good narratives. I think that as my sort of career has gone on, I found that it's great to be able to mine data. Everybody can mine data. What makes people special, guys like Matt Kelly have done this.
Yeah.
They can find that narrative before anybody else, right? And if there's any correlation to it, they look genius. But if you can find that narrative and support it, it makes for such an engaging subject matter. And I think that's what makes these podcasters so impressive. Guys like JJ Silva, these articles that they wrote, Rich Rebar, like they can go into the future and think ahead of everybody else and come up with these concepts that are just so novel. And that's what I have tried to do. And I think that's something that you're going to hear a lot of on this episode, I believe.
I was going to say, speaking of which, let's go.
So we're going to do it. So I want to start by saying this to me has been one of the more positive off seasons that I've seen in a long time. From the conversation about rookies, veterans, change of locations, quarterbacks, rookies, and vets. Like, I feel like I haven't heard any negative analysis whatso far this year. And what I wanted to do on this episode, and it's the reason why I thought you were the best fit for a guest, I want cold water takes. I want to take what everybody believes is going to be the outcome and give them the fact-based potential devil's advocate opposing view and go, but what if this was the scenario that played out? So we've got a bunch of cold water takes. We've listed a bunch of quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, all these guys. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Now, before we get into that, though, I wanted to start this episode out with a Dynasty trade. Normally, I do this towards the back of the show, but I figured this would be a great place to start since I've got you here. You are a Dynasty ranker over at the Undroppables, so this should be cake for you. So let's do a deal breakers right now. We only use hard-hitting beats on this show. There's no soft music that you're going to hear in the background. So let's dive into this trade, and everybody in the chat, feel free to chime in on this. Let's see if Mr. Jax nails this one. Here we go right here. Trade number 1, DJ Moore and a 2023 first, or Jamar Chase and a 2023 second. Where's your head at on this one currently?
When you first shared it, my initial reaction is give me Jamar Chase. Because at the end of the day, like normally when you're trying to buy an opportunity of Jamar Chase, the price tag is extremely high. You can give a 23 first plus some stuff, and generally speaking, it's declined. So in this case, for me, the difference between Jamar Chase and DJ Moore is that first and second. That's fine. I'm getting a second back. It's like, I know that people say, could be a pretty big difference, but in a loaded class, it's very possible, especially if that second looks like it could be anywhere in that first half of the second round. I love the Jamar Chase side. Now, if you tell me that the second is super late, and I think you're going to go there, that the first is super early, well, now I start to tighten up a little bit.
So let's say that 2023 first is a top 5 pick. So that's a top 5 pick and DJ Moore. And let's say that 2023 second is actually a later 2023 second. Let's say it's between 208 and 212. Does that change your opinion on this deal whatsoever?
It makes it harder to push the button, but I think you kind of have to almost, like, because, you're hoping with that top 5 pick to get a Jamar Chase type. That's just you'd take it now. So might as well take it now. And then, you're basically selling DJ Moore for a late second. But yeah, I think you kind of have to, because there's no other way to gain access to a guy like Jamar Chase. And he's going to be this type of player it's not like you're talking about an older player, a 25, 26-year-old player. This is a second-year player. And so I would probably still feel very, very compelled to push the button. And this is coming from me. I am like the ultimate. I have not traded away a 23 first on purpose for a long time. Right. I did make a mistake and accidentally traded one away. But yeah, I'm just not giving up 23 first for any reason.
Yeah, I think the argument for sure is that we've seen Jamar Chase with Burrow. We've seen Jamar Chase in what I would consider limited opportunity. 128 targets is going to look laughable at some point in Jamar Chase's career, right? Like when Jamar Chase gets to 150, 170 targets, 2,000 receiving yards is absolutely in his range of outcomes. That sounds insane to say, but we pushed close to 1,500 last year in 17 games on 130 targets. It's not an impossibility for a guy that can take any catch to the house. Now, with that being said, I would make the argument that DJ Moore, if you gave everybody the same quarterbacks, I would make the argument that DJ Moore could be the third best receiver in the NFL. I love him that much. I think the talent profile, I think the ability after the catch, I think the athleticism, everything we've seen, he's had atrocious quarterback play forever. The assumption now, though, is that Baker Mayfield will be the best that he has ever had. Is that correct?
Yeah, isn't that sad?
It is sad.
It's sad.
I mean, it's continually sad. I mean, okay, let's say that Jamar Chase was with Davis Mills suddenly. There was just a trade. No Joe Burrow for Davis Mills. How much of that Joe Burrow deal is driving Jamar Chase? Because I know it's a significant part. Chase is a monster by himself. But when we look at DJ Moore, that's what gets thrown against him. The history of bad quarterback play, despite the fact that last year his targets were absolutely insane. But with Chase, how much of Burrow matters?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I mean, because it's the reason, excuse me, of course, we all have the Chase, Justin Jefferson tier as the lonely two-man tier in Dynasty. And I separate those two with ageism. Right. Chase is 1 year younger, and Joe Burrow, Chase being tied to the better quarterback for the longer period of time. And because, I mean, they're both outstanding players, but, who knows what happens to Kirk Cousins and, in another year, who knows, right? So Justin Jefferson could get a quarterback downgrade where Jamar Chase won't be getting a downgrade unless there's an injury, of course. So, yeah, I think that would at least affect it, but it's such a speculative that I don't know how to think about it,
Right. No, fantasy football, I would take Chase and the second, but I would also never trade up from DJ Moore and a first for similar production and a sexier package.
Right.
Yeah. It makes total sense.
No.
It makes total sense.
It's just hard. It's hard to say no to Jamar Chase for when you're basically, giving up just that single 23 first. Now, if that single 23 first, but I even if it's a top 3 pick, I mean, you kind of have to really think about it because, I mean, if you're saying Bijan Robinson right now for Jamar Chase, I think I'd rather have Jamar Chase, right?
Yeah. We know what Jamar Chase is in the league, and we know that Jamar Chase could put up. I don't know how many points Bijan could put up, but we know that Jamar Chase can clearly average between 17 and 22. So, I mean, that's elite running back numbers wrapped into a wide receiver that doesn't get hurt.
And I'll give you another one. Like, we talk about CJ Stroud, and Bryce Young, right? Right. And so, oh my God, they can't miss, right? Weren't we saying that shit about Fields and Lawrence, right? We were saying that about Fields and Lawrence. And it's not like they've necessarily, not hit, but they didn't hit yet. You know what I mean? It's not like you're like, oh, can't trade Fields. I mean, Fields gets traded all the time. You'd gladly trade Fields for Chase, and effectively that was what that, right? So that was effectively what that early first round pick represented was that player. So, there's too much irregularity with the draft. I would definitely want Chase over the pick. And I'm willing to sort of give up DJ Moore and get a second back to make that trade happen. So, yeah, I think no matter what, I'm pulling the trigger for Jamar Chase in that trade. Sum it all up.
Well, it's so crazy, too, because oftentimes it's the shiny new toy. Like you're saying, it's the unknown quarterback. And my God, we've seen a lot of first-round quarterbacks bust. Like the history of first-round quarterbacks bust, and we'll get into this, is lengthy. But, yeah, you look at Jamar Chase, he already did it. Like, he's already fired at an elite level in the NFL, and it's just not even close. So, with that being said, I think that's the right answer. I'm a huge DJ Moore stan, but Jamar Chase with a second makes it a lot closer. I shouldn't even say closer. I mean, it starts to become an argument when you make that early first, a top 3 type pick. So that's absolutely how I feel as well. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're doing a brand new section. It is called Cold Water, and you and I are going to go through a multitude of players, and just like I did last week, I've got a quote that's going to come up on the screen. I'm going to pick your brain about each one of these guys. So let's jump into cold water. Now, these graphics are all handmade, and they take a long-ass time to make. I'll tell you what, that one was made specially for this episode, so there you go.
Could have fooled me.
What do you mean could have fooled you?
Fool me. I mean,
I did fool you. So let me look in here real quick. God, I love how this just happened. Let me pick your brain on this first player. So Trey Lance is a surefire elite QB1. Are you buying that take?
So it's so funny because I was just this last episode of the Undrafted. We closed the show on Trey Lance questions. And then I just did Nick Botiford's pod, Nerding Out, last night. And this was the first question he asked me. And here I am again being asked about Trey Lance. And my question to anybody who is listening is very simple. Is Trey Lance a good NFL quarterback? You know, in other words, we don't know that. We do know, and so people will be like, obviously, dude, he's going to put up a rushing floor, all that, right? And it's like, yeah. If he is a good NFL quarterback, then he is a top 5 dynasty superflex asset, of course, because if he's good, then he's got the rushing floor, the whole thing. I get it, but we don't know if he's like I say it every time. Eventually, it's 3rd and 8. You know,
right.
And you know, if you've got Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers on 3rd and 8, you're like, yeah, dude. Joe Burrow, right? You're like, Justin Herbert, we're gonna get this done. You know, but if you have Jalen Hurts, you're still a little unsure. Now, Jalen Hurts brings other things to the table, no doubt. But on 3rd and 8, you're like, oh, let's see here, man. You know, and where is Trey Lance gonna fall on that spectrum? Right? Is he gonna be awful, mediocre, or is he good? Like, imagine if he's Joe Burrow as a passer. Well, then you've got like the most elite dynasty asset there could be. I get that. I totally see that. But what if he's not very good? Then San Francisco is going to be looking to go to now, especially Jimmy Garoppolo. So that's the floor. That's where you have to look there, which is why I think he's properly priced in these redraft leagues. I think he's like right around quarterback 10 to 13. Isn't that about right?
I think so.
I think in some ways he's priced with that floor, but certainly not in Dynasty. When you talk about Dynasty, he's not priced with any floor in mind whatsoever.
No, he's certainly way up at the top. I know that in many rankings he's top 10. I think for some guys are being a bit tepid. He's back half of the top 10, but obviously the rushing upside is what keeps him in the conversation, right? I mean, it's 100% without a doubt the reason that he is in every conversation. But what I found interesting and what I think puts a lot of pressure on him was the re-signing of Jimmy Garoppolo. Like that was one of the more curious decisions that San Francisco made because we know that Trey Lance is going to make mistakes. This is essentially his rookie year. If this was baseball, this would be his rookie year, right? So it's essentially his rookie year, and he's going to make mistakes. We have 1 year of collegiate football, basically. And even in that year, you go back to Pro Football Focus and look at the data. He struggled versus UC Davis. He struggled versus Missouri State. He struggled versus South Dakota State. So there were a lot of questions about his true capability. Because remember, just because a couple years has gone by, that doesn't negate the fact that he was considered a raw prospect coming into the league, right? Like San Francisco taking him where they did was still a raw player.
Yes. And I agree. Like that's my whole point is like he hasn't necessarily shown like, oh, he's definitely good as an NFL quarterback. And you bring up Jimmy G. I think there's obviously some gamesmanship there, especially with Seattle. I think there was word out that Seattle was going to sign him, and they were like, no, thank you. So, but look at his like 3 starts last year, or his 3 games he played. Like 2 of the games he played, he was under 52% completion percentage. You know, that's not great. So he was pretty darn good though, actually throwing the football last year. He basically was like had 100 quarterback rating. His quarterback rating was 97.3. So, he had a lot of big plays to sort of buoy that. We'll see, man. If you ask me, gun to the head, what does Dwayne McFarland say? Girl Scout with a water gun to the head. I'm gonna say he's gonna be good, but I also am just not sure. I think that's kind of where I'm at. But if you just ask me straight away, he's gonna be good. But the cold water is ready to fall on your head this year if he all of a sudden comes out the gate, they're 1-3, and he has a couple of those just difficult games, especially if, like, their defense is so good, their rushing attack is so good. I think that's what sort of helped him be successful. That's part of this thing. I mean, if you switched him and Trevor Lawrence, how would you feel about this whole thing, right? It'd be a lot different conversation.
Yeah. I mean, that's my argument with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, right? It's that there's some confidence built into that. Obviously, Trey Lance, the legs keep him in the conversation. And as Blitzing Buzzard said, I had it up on the screen there a moment ago, said having 3 of the best yards after the catch pass catchers in the league will make his job not require many precision pass attempts. That's probably true. Now,
yes,
it's less of an argument whether Trey Lance will be a surefire QB1 because his legs alone are going to make him a QB1. I mean, he's going to be right in there as a QB1 with his legs. The argument, which we're going to get to soon, is what happens to the other guys around him because he's eating up 11.3 rush attempts per game, which with Jimmy Garoppolo was only 2.5. So those rush attempts now, once upon a time, were pass attempts. So the assumption that all these guys are going to flourish beneath them is probably not totally accurate. But you brought up Trevor Lawrence, and I want to ask you about Trevor Lawrence. A statement somebody gave me was Trevor Lawrence will absolutely not bust. Do you agree with that?
No. I mean, right, there's definitely still the possibility that he busts. I do think, though, that when you think about Trevor Lawrence, could it have been any worse last year? Like, you think back to last year, he didn't have any weapons. The front office absolutely whiffed on the draft. They took ETN, he got hurt. So the only player that was supposedly good in that draft class got hurt. They drafted 2 guys who were hurt, which I thought was just brilliant. I mean, anytime you're trying to build around a young quarterback, definitely draft some guys who are injured. Just an awful draft. They had one of the worst coaches probably in the history of the NFL. One of the most dysfunctional front offices and coaching staffs that you could even conceivably assemble. No weapons, and the kid stood in there for 17 games and threw over 60% completion percentage and was unable to throw touchdowns. That's not a surprise. So I do see the possibility that he's good, and I do think he will be, but my oh my, he's not out of the woods yet.
Yeah, it's an interesting one for Trevor Lawrence because nobody really has the balls to not say he's a top 10 dynasty quarterback. But the reality is that we're one bad season away from him being ranked, QB 15, QB 16. And the only thing that can really save him at that point is kind of what happened to Tua, where he gets these weapons, he gets this new coach, this revitalization happens, and suddenly it's like confidence is restored. But Jacksonville has been a difficult place to play for the longest time. When you look at Trevor Lawrence, though, it was the money throws, it was the volume. Those are the 2 things that you hang your hat on. I love Christian Kirk this year as an offensive weapon just because I don't think there's anything else there, and Jacksonville's going to be losing in a lot of games.
Yes.
But like you said, he's definitely not outside of the woods yet. I mean, finishes the QB 22 last year, 12.7 fantasy points per game. Not that great looking at his pure passing metrics on Player Profile in terms of, passing accuracy versus different, coverage types. So for people, if you're a believer, if you're a truther, and I realize if we're going to extend ourselves to best case scenario, this would be the guy that you would allow yourself to do this with, because he is the guy that had the profile that seemed infallible, right? Like this seemed like this is a generational talent. It's just funny how quick that narrative changes.
Yeah, I almost have like 0 shares of these guys in Dynasty. I mean, when in other words, the only time I ever drafted them was in the rookie draft when they were there, right? I don't think I took a single share of Lance, Fields, or Lawrence in a startup just because they were so highly priced. So I think there's definitely, you just never know. I mean, we've seen this story so many times. I mean, people have revisionist history. They go back and say, we knew this guy sucked, or Josh Rosen, Sam Darnold, you can go back forever. Yes. And it's like, you just see Baker Mayfield, yes. I mean, all of them. It's not, so everybody says, and this is the fallacy in Dynasty is, quarterbacks are basically the easiest. Just draft them; they last for 15 years. It's like, no, they don't. No, they don't. The one thing they do is they at least hold some value if they're drafted in that sort of the top 10, except for Josh Rosen, which I suppose even proves the point that even that's not true necessarily, but generally those guys get multiple years to sort of prove themselves. Yes. And oftentimes once you feel like you're out on them, you can find someone in your league who's like still sort of in and the value sort of still holds and you can throw them in a trade and move on. But like, it's not always that good. You're not always going to have this top level talent. I mean, I was fooled too. I felt like Fields and Lawrence were no doubters, and lots of doubt right now. Lots of doubt.
I mean, yeah, there's lots of doubt surrounding it. I think with Lawrence, we all, for many reasons, love him as a prospect, don't want to give up on him. He'll have a multitude of years to have this opportunity to be successful, even if, let's say he busts. And again, guys, this is a cold water episode, okay? These aren't necessarily things that we fully believe in, but this is the reality of the facts and the narratives that are just not being talked about. But even if his time in Jacksonville ends, and let's say New York is still devoid of quarterback, you bet your ass Trevor Lawrence is going to get a shot at that job. And all the confidence in the world is going to be kickstarted again, and they're going to go, we can do it. We can get the guy from college. We'll build him back up. But I mean, you named it. Jordan Love, Daniel Jones, Dwayne Haskins, Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen, Trubisky, Goff, Wentz. Like, the list goes on and on. Guys that, and Goff's been all right, but a lot of guys that there was this incredible expectation for, not nearly the expectation of Trevor Lawrence, by the way. Let's just put a nice tier break. I mean, Baker was clearly a favorite coming out of college, but he was not Trevor Lawrence.
No, but by the way, you mentioned Goff and you said, well, he's been pretty good. He was in an amazing system with amazing weapons around him. So, it's not like a quarterback is going to be great with like a shit team. We saw it with Tom Brady throughout his entire career. We would argue pretty successfully, just like Michael Jordan, that Tom Brady is the greatest of all time, right? Easy to argue. My guy.
I just keep slipping the note under the door. Yeah.
Hey, fold it in there. But listen, right? But if you go back and look at Tom Brady, it's like, oh, he had a down year the year before they got checks notes, Randy fucking Moss. And then, sets the record for passing touchdowns the year he has Randy Moss. That's weird. And then, he has a down year and then back up again when he has Rob Gronkowski, the greatest tight end of all time.
Yes.
So there's situational, environmental things that help or hurt these quarterbacks, which is why I'm necessarily concerned about both Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence, not as players, but especially Justin Fields right now. My goodness, I am concerned for him, not about him.
Well, we should move to Justin Fields because he is next on this list. I do want to say that's very much the Tua Tagovailoa point of view for me. He got these weapons. Jaylen Waddle was an excellent draft pick. Now they add Tyreek. You got all this athleticism. That they add Chase Edmonds. They get this new coach that's very creative, and suddenly, whether it's a veil that's been pulled over our eyes or we're ready to buy into the potential, we go, well, fuck, this is the year. This has to be the year because everything is lined up properly. And it's the same argument with some of these guys. Some of these really talented players, Trey Lance for that matter. It's really hard to argue that they won't fire in fantasy wise. They won't fire as a fantasy asset in the league because it's too hard to argue the profile. And I think when you look at, again, like Miami, it's very hard to argue the profile that he'll be bad because it's like, well, if he's bad, he's just bad himself.
He's done.
Right? Because they gave him every other opportunity. Now, Justin.
Great coaching, great offensive line, and great weapons. What more do you want, dude?
That's exactly it. What I was going to say is the opposite is being said for Justin Fields because the issue is, how many high-end quarterbacks, early draft picks were ruined by an organization?
A lot of them. I mean, it goes back to David Carr, right? I mean, pour one out for poor David Carr. But, I mean, he was sacked like a record number of times in his first 2 seasons and then like was afraid to go on the field again. I mean, so many of these were institutional failures rather than player failures. Sam Darnold, had to suffer under Gaze. Now it's probable that Sam Darnold is terrible at quarterback. I'll of course say that, but he was not given any good advantages. He had no weapons, no offensive line, and a coke sniffing head coach.
Right.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Right. Keeps you energetic. I just look at this situation as a whole. in Chicago. So Justin Fields comes out of year one, and there's two primary needs for him. They need weapons and they need offensive line help. And what do they do coming out of the draft? They select the oldest wide receiver in the draft in round 3, and they don't touch an offensive lineman until round 5. And now every publication in the world, including Sharp Fantasy Analysis, has the Bears offensive line ranked 32nd in the league. So what the fuck is going to happen with Justin Fields in year 2?
I mean, it's really, honestly, I love Justin Fields. He was my number 2 quarterback prospect coming out of that class. I didn't see anything last year that would make me feel like he's not still that. He's like, dude, he runs a 4.4. Athleticism is there for him. The body is there for him. He's got that Dak, Jalen Hurts, like he's stocky body. And, he's got a pretty lively arm, but unfortunately we're not going to really see what he's made of. I do have some inside information that they're going to run a few more of those RPO type things. And, they're trying to put in some read option stuff with Justin Fields so that he can get a little bit more rushing, which I don't know if any of that shit matters because, again, their offensive line is terrible. So whether they're running the football or putting him in shotgun, taking snaps, play action, it's all going to be rough because he has no weapons and no line. Oh, my God.
I mean, Darnell Mooney looks like a potential star in this offense in many regards, but this team, it's brutal. The offensive line stinks. I mean, Fields was not efficient behind a bad offensive line last year. It's amazing for him to go into a whole new year and just realize they didn't do anything for me. Like Velus is clearly not going to be the answer. I mean, just using the data we have before us, I've drafted him in a couple of rookie drafts. Of course, I'm a fucking gambler, but he can't possibly be the answer. Now we're like, it's got to be Cole Kmet. It's his time to shine.
Right.
That's because there's nobody else. There's no one else to go with. And it's like, he's got to be looking around going, I've got Darnell Mooney, Cole Kmet, Velus Jones, the worst offensive line in the history of football. And Nate, I'm coming off of a bad year.
Nate, anytime you say, oh, the Bears have no weapons, someone will be like, dude, Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet, right? They always say that, right? Let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
If Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet were both on the Cincinnati Bengals, how many targets would they get?
I don't like the current Bengals. Probably not that many.
Probably not that many.
Yeah,
so
not
it's
that
not
many.
like, I mean, Darnell Mooney would get like 70 or 80 targets as a field stretcher, and Cole Kmet would be the 4th option. Like, it's the 5th option. Who knows? I mean, these aren't elite players. They're just the best Chicago has, so they're going to be fed targets. Yes, and for fantasy, they will be good assets to have. Don't get me wrong, but it's not like Cole Kmet is like a top 4 tight end in the NFL.
I mean, it's brutal. When you talk about him rushing, and he was, I think, number 6 overall in rushing last year, 72 rush attempts. In the, how many games did he play last year? He played, 12 games last year? So in the 12 games that he played last year, his biggest game was 26 fantasy points. Outside of that, a majority of his games went for close to less than 10 points. He averaged 11.4 fantasy points per game, was the QB 31. I don't know how you argue that it gets better. And if he rushes more, doesn't that just increase the propensity for injury and all the other things that, look, we want mobile quarterbacks, but I want mobile quarterbacks in the sense of Dak, of Deshaun Watson. I love Jalen Hurts, but give me the guy that can rush 70 to 80 times a year and throw like crazy, has amazing arm talent, totally accurate. I like Justin Fields, but damn, it feels like they're trying to manifest production for this team, and it's not in the best interest of this quarterback.
Yeah, I think, let's stop piling on Justin Fields after this, but we need to move on. Poor guy. I just feel bad now. I don't have sympathy. I mean, this is turning into a sad show. I thought we were going to have fun. But in all honesty, I think what fantasy does to our brains is it makes us evaluate quarterbacks differently. Like, like Trey Lance right now, if you got 0 points in fantasy for any rushing that a quarterback did, you would not even, Trey Lance wouldn't even be, he'd be like,
I agree, but I don't want to live in that universe.
No, I don't either. But what I'm saying is that the rushing only makes them viable in fantasy, not in real life.
Yes.
So like my point is that they still have to be good at the part that Mahomes and Herbert are good at. Otherwise, they're short-lived. That's
No, you're totally right. And this was the argument. We're going to get to him in a minute, but this was the argument with Jalen Hurts coming out of that first season. You heard the organization going through the draft. Like, we'll talk about this, but it's very much that fact that for fantasy purposes, we can love these guys and they can score 25 fantasy points a game, but the organization can still be in the background going, this isn't the guy. Like, we're not going to win a title.
I'll give you an example. It was Jameis Winston. I mean, I had Jameis Winston like winning titles for me the last year in Tampa Bay. I always said, mark him down, Jameis, for 6 touchdowns. I don't know which team they're going to, but he's throwing 6 today.
Right.
Right? He would throw 3 or 4 to his team, 3 or 4 to the other team, and fucking I'm going to win my matchup because he's going to have 400 yards, and that's just what it's going to be. Now, that's good for fantasy. So that means I was happy to roster him, but I also knew, like, Tampa Bay might move on from this guy. And sure enough, they moved on. Same thing with Hurts to some degree. Yeah.
Any given moment. So let's talk about a guy that just got the bag, broke my heart, got the bag in the same year, and that is my man, Russell Wilson. So here's the question. Russell Wilson in Denver means QB overall #1 potential.
Does it? I don't know about that.
I'm asking you, does it?
Oh, I don't think so, no. I don't really think so.
Okay, I'll go first on Russ if you want me to go first.
I don't think so. No, but I just don't think so.
No, I agree. I actually don't think so either. Like, I love Russell Wilson, but I've got some thoughts on this. So I'm not fully convinced that they let Russ completely out of his chastity either. Like, I'm not sure that Denver is the spot as much as we want it to be. Because with Nathaniel Hackett as the new head coach, if we look back at the trends, what was it? His 3 seasons as the OC in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers, the Packers never ranked better than number 15 in the NFL in passing attempts. So if the belief is that right away we're going to see Russ top 3 in pass attempts, you can throw that shit right out the window because there's not a chance in hell that that's going to happen. Now we fast forward and look at Denver. This is actually a much better run game in Denver than they had in Green Bay, despite what people might want to say about Aaron Jones. Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams are absolutely amazing. So I'll make this statement. It wouldn't shock me a single bit if Russell Wilson still did not break his career high in pass attempts in 17 games in Denver.
Yeah,
there it is.
I mean, I know you really wanted to get that take off. I mean, we were talking about pre-show. You're like, hey, whatever you do, just give me clear runway for this Russell Wilson part. So I was like just kind of dodging and weaving. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to just pass you the ball right out when we inbounded it. I just wanted to give it right to you. Look, I think all of us who have rostered Russell Wilson over the years have been frustrated. It's the let Russ cook thing. Well, yeah, I mean, maybe we'll be saying some of that again this year. But yeah, the quarterback 1 overall, man, that either requires a lot of rushing, which I've argued that Russell Wilson will rush more frequently this year than he will have last year. Because last year I feel like he was checked out. He also was injured, but I definitely think he was checked out. I don't think I saw a couple plays when I was watching Seattle where it was like 3rd and 5, and it would just be like he had plenty of room to just like run for the first down. He just like throw it at someone's feet and just jog off to the sideline. I was like, oh shit, that don't look good. And so there was a couple of those moments where and especially when we're used to seeing a few years ago when Russ would be down 6 with a minute left, and he would just find a way to get up and down the field very, very quickly. And then we'd be like, why don't they do that all game? And they never would. But last year, I didn't feel like he was checked in enough. Now, he's paid. He's with a new team. I think there's going to be a lot of excitement. He did the Broncos country, let's ride. So, I mean, you can tell he's excited with that commercial, right? So that was pretty fun. Yeah, anyway,
go on,
let's ride.
Please.
Yeah, I mean, this is a key analysis, analysis.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is that I do think he will be more checked in, rush more, but I don't think he rushes enough to give him huge rushing upside. And I just don't see 40, 50 touchdown passes. As you point out, I think they're going to score a lot of touchdowns on the ground. I just don't see it. When you have guys like Mahomes, Herbert, Brady, and then all the rushing guys, I don't see it. Yeah,
it's a difficult ceiling. I mean, again, you think about guys like Trey Lance. If Trey Lance if Jalen Hurts, if these guys continue to rush 110 times a year and they're throwing 16, 18, 20 touchdowns, Russ is not going to be able to touch that on his rushing volume. Now, he's an incredibly efficient quarterback. This is where I think the one argument that could be made for Russ is if we take the dials the way they've always been turned and just move him to Denver, I think that we can see a lot of similar success, but Russ has only been the QB number 1 overall, I think, one time in his entire career. And again, this is a better running team. This is a team that's got a very middle-of-the-road strength of schedule, so I don't see them trailing like they did in Seattle. I don't think they're going to have to force the big plays to make up ground. It's going to still be a hallmark of his game. It's Russell fucking Wilson, and they just paid him a bunch of money. But I've got questions about truly how far I think they're going to let Russ go. Here's a question from the chat. Looks like a good question here. So does he need 40, though? He was QB1 in 2017 with 34 touchdowns and about 600 rush yards.
Yeah. What year was that again that he was QB1?
He said 2017. I would have to go back and look at who was competing with him at the time. I don't know that we need to see Russ necessarily get to 40 touchdowns to get there, but it's going to have to come on the rushing as well. Like I don't know if the rushing sticks. He's been a guy that averaged between 4 and 5 rush attempts per game throughout his career. Denver just paid him a ton of money. He scrambles out of necessity. Russell Wilson's definitely not Lamar Jackson. What Trey Lance will be, a guy that sees blood in the water and is going to run for 17 yards. Is going to get everything he can get. Russ is getting you that first down, getting out of bounds. He'll take the little extra if he can. But I just question, again, if in Denver, this is going to be the situation that lends itself to a QB number 1 overall finish. I would argue no. Are you looking something up right now?
Yeah, I was just texting my agent. I don't know if I still want to do this show. Let me see if no, I'm going to stay in.
Get out
he offered
mid-show.
me a little bit more money. No, okay. he upped it. This is bad, but I'm in still. Hey, listen. I sent a tweet recently about Russell Wilson's rushing attempts. I'm just going to go from 2012 on. It was 5.9 a game. The rushing attempts per game, 5.9, 6, 7.4, 6.4, 4.5, 5.9, 4.2, 4.7, 5.2. Last year, 3.1. Yes. Like literally way down. Like, even in 2020, it was 5.2. Like it hasn't been just a steady decline. Last year was an aberration. And they weren't competing. They weren't good. Like he was disconnected and he was hurt. I think all those things come together with him like, F this. I'm getting a fucking contract. I'm not going to go get my head taken off. I think this year it's like, I'm going to go get a Super Bowl. So I think he's going to play to win. It's going to be a super competitive division. I do think, I think he has, when you say quarterback 1 overall, no. Quarterback 1, yeah. I mean, I think he can be sure. a solid quarter in the quarterback 1 conversation. I just don't think he has QB1 overall upside. But I think he's going to run, 5 times a game roughly. I mean, in that ballpark. Okay. And that's going to give him some I do. Okay. Because because he's going to need to convert to keep up with Mahomes and Derek Carr and Justin Herbert in that division. So I do think he's gonna have to move the ball more often. They do have a good running game. They've got great passing weapons. I get all that, but I think they're gonna have to, convert, over and over in high scoring, close games late. You have to run the football as a quarterback who's got mobility.
That's a fair argument. I think that Seattle has trailed forever. I think that they have been in a competitive division, but the shootouts exist in a crazy way in the new division that he is in. Let me ask you a question about Jalen Hurts, though, because Jalen Hurts is a player that I think a lot of people have turned the corner on a little bit. I think people were fearful. Yeah. Suddenly they're confident again. Somebody said to me, Jalen Hurts isn't going anywhere. Buy him with long-term confidence. Do you agree with that statement?
Kind of. It's supposed to be a cold take episode, but I was asked this question on Botiford's show last night, and I said, with every day that passes, you get more and more confident in Jalen Hurts, right? Because when he was 2 games in, it was like, I don't know, is he going to hold on to it next week? And, and then it's like, well, he's starting, the beginning of next year, and now we're in next year and he's starting. And so the further you go, the more confident you get. I just think it's that simple. I think, and here's my point, I think they're going to be really good, Philadelphia, that is. And I don't think he's going to need to be dynamic and lead that team. I think he's just going to have to sort of steer that ship. I think they're going to have a pretty good rushing attack. They're going to have great weapons. I mean, adding A.J. Brown to Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert gives him great weapons. I think that, by the way, you had mentioned Trey Lance with the three guys in San Francisco,
Yep.
Ayuk, Debo, Kittle,
Yep.
and unsure if he can sustain all three. I feel the exact same way with Hurts and these three.
Yep.
I think one of these six guys, the three I just mentioned and the three in Philly, someone's going to disappoint. And I don't know which one it is. I've been trying to figure that one out. I've been kind of just fading Ayuk and Devontae Smith for that reason, but it may not be those guys. It could be someone else. But, I think Kittle's going to get his. I like the play action stuff and the short to the line of scrimmage Kittle stuff with Trey Lance, but that's just me. I also like Goddard. Maybe I'm just addicted to tight ends. That's my own problem. But I think the longer that we go with there was no double entendre to that either. I swear.
That's good. Go on.
No. I'm just talking straight football here, guys. Okay. But in when you talk about Jalen Hurts, with every day that goes by, you should become more and more confident in him because the team is becoming more and more confident. I mean, the second he gets his contract, if he does, and he stays in Philadelphia, I mean, he's a top 5 dynasty quarterback at that point, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It was a weird thing because pre-draft, as I was trying to mention today, pre-draft, everybody was scared. You couldn't sell Jalen Hurts for anything worth a crap because everybody was like, no, Philly's drafting a guy. They're taking a quarterback, right? They're selecting a quarterback. Yep. And it's funny how people's confidence changed because you already had seen him play in 2021 at the point in time that this draft was going to commence. So it's not like you didn't know what you were getting yourself into, but then everybody had this erosion of confidence. But we even had the coaching staff prior to that season saying, we're not going to name the starter yet. We don't know who the starter of this offense is. It was just a bunch of bullshit that didn't make a lot of sense surrounding him. Now we look forward a year into 2023, which should be a really good class. They're sitting on 2 first-round picks, a pick in the second round. I think they've got 4 or 5 picks in the first 3 rounds. Why are we ruling out the potential that if Jalen Hurts, again, great for fantasy, but doesn't get Philly where they need to be, what are the odds that we're talking, 5 months from now about Philly using those picks on one of these top couple quarterbacks coming into the draft?
Yeah, no doubt. You said it perfectly because while I think it will be positive, the other side of that, I'm not like 100%, I'm like 58%, and I'm getting more and more positive as we go along. But you're right. What if they go 9-8, miss the playoffs?
Yep.
What if they go 10-7, make the playoffs, and lose in round 1 at home terribly or something? There's a couple of outs where Philly could be just like, this is fucked up. We can't win with this guy. The Philly media, the fan base, all of a sudden, and they're not married to him, so they can just move on. They can just draft a guy and figure it out. So that 100% could happen. And the one thing I would say to that though is like, there's at least enough shitbag quarterbacks on other teams where other teams would be like, yeah, we'll take Jalen Hurts. So I think he's buoyed to, a starting position somewhere else. So it doesn't matter as much now because I think he's viewed as a top 32, obviously better than that, but a top 32 quarterback in the NFL.
I think that's exactly right. I think this was more the argument for Jalen Hurts in Philly, but I think that's exactly the point because with him still under contract, they could draft a guy and he becomes probably the best backup in the league, arguably at that point where all these teams that are salivating, that are pitching the largest tents you've ever seen over Trey Lance and Lamar Jackson and Kyler Murray and these athletic mobile quarterbacks with these arms like Jalen Hurts is like right here. I've seen him play in the NFL. I've seen him be successful. And it's that girlfriend that thinks that they can fix the biker, he's like, oh, he's a bad dude, but I can fix him. And it's like, they're like, yeah, we could bring Jalen Hurts in and we can remedy the issues that they couldn't in Philly. We can do it. They couldn't. So I think you're right. I think that there is a stint beyond Philly if it's not Philly. But man, what we saw last year, the narratives throughout the entire draft, and never once, to my knowledge, did Philly really dispel the idea that they weren't going to take a quarterback. I don't remember them coming out going, no. This is our guy definitively, without question. We are not taking a quarterback. Right. So you have that at play. You have these future picks. It's a kind of a nerve-wracking situation, almost in the sense that we get with Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo. Those steps behind him, that looking over your shoulder, it's the same thing with Jalen Hurts because he knows that Philly is primed potentially to replace him or bring in substantial competition. So that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, what I hear in your voice is that you should change your Twitter handle to a scared Jew.
We've got a long history of being afraid. So I'm afraid of most things. Okay. Like this is my life. Okay. I'm mostly outraged, but I'm often fearful. Listen, I want to stay on this Philly train. Okay. I want to continue talking
Mostly
Philly.
outraged, but often
Please.
fearful.
Please.
That's a bumper sticker.
I
Mostly
really,
outraged, but often fearful. Great t-shirt.
My
Just
guy
make it a
Joel
t-shirt.
just became a member. Joel, you know what that means?
Because of that statement. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you, Joel. We really powerhouse this moment. Love you, Joel. Thank you very
One scared
much.
Jew. That was it. He's in.
We're in. Thank
These
you,
are the
guys.
people I love.
Thank you. Access.
Make him a t-shirt.
I will make Mr. Jax answer a trade question at the end. We'll get him to do that. But I want to ask him another question about Philly because we mentioned A.J. Brown earlier. The question that I have, this was a statement posed to me. A.J. Brown will be better in Philly than he was in Tennessee. Do you agree with that?
Again, on the margin, yes, but not for sure. I mean, because he was the only show in town. I mean, obviously outside Derrick Henry, I understand, but the only passing game weapon in town. Whereas here, like I just mentioned, someone's going to disappoint because of the lower pass volume and the multiple weapons that are, alpha weapons, if you will. I mean, Devontae Smith, Heisman Trophy winner. I mean, I know you were a little bit soft on him, but, I think he's a hell of a football player. Dallas Goedert's one of the most efficient tight ends in the NFL, absolutely explosive, and will command targets. So when you have two guys like that, and then you bring in A.J. Brown on a week-to-week basis, and, they just might not need him that much. They might not be throwing that many pass attempts, and, all of a sudden Goddard's open, and, sorry, I didn't throw anything to A.J. Brown. So he can get boxed out, not because he's not a good player, but just circumstantially, there are other good players. The pass volume is a little bit lower, and A.J. Brown could see a little bit less. On the flip side, I do think this is going to be a more prolific team than Tennessee. I think Tennessee won in a little bit of a ground and pound way, obviously riding Derrick Henry and then throwing play action to A.J. Brown most often, but, also a little bit of a low volume offense, slow paced. I think Philly should, score more, advance the ball more often. And I do think that they'll be looking to take care of their very high-priced prize in A.J. Brown. So I think they'll be looking to get him involved. So I do think he will be as good, but it's not for sure.
Well, I mean, listen, everybody wants smoke blown up their ass, okay? Everybody wants you to hit them with a bag of fucking powdered sugar. Everybody wants to be lied to. That's why they listen to many other podcasts, because that's what they want. They want to feel satiated. They want their biases confirmed. You look at Philly last year, 104 targets to Devonta Smith. Okay, he was the number one targeted option in this offense. You go look at the guys on teams that had quarterbacks that rushed over 100 times. That's Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts. The wide receiver ones on those teams. Diggs was the wide receiver 10. Marquise Brown, the wide receiver 25. Devonta Smith, the wide receiver 43. And people are like, well, look at Stephon Diggs. He was the wide receiver 10. Here's the difference. If I extrapolate Jalen Hurts passing attempts and give him a full 17 games, he still comes up 156 short of Josh Allen. So It's not like, what do you guys think is happening out there? You think that he's just throwing two footballs at once and he's getting double pass attempts? He's not. They don't throw the ball as often as you would hope that they would. And it just absolutely fucking blows me away. And on top of all of this, this team is projected to have the second easiest strength of schedule next year. Now, I know that can be total fluff and mean nothing, but if you're not trailing in games that frequently, what's the reason that Jalen Hurts needs to just let it rip all game? What's the reason? Like, how do you get to A.J. Brown 150 targets? How do we get there?
You don't get there, and let me share this with you. I'm gonna piggyback this point and help you make it. So last year, you're welcome. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah,
my agent told me I should do this a little bit more as opposed to.
Him?
No, he's texting. It's like a FaceTime. It's better than a text.
Go on
I mean, he's right there. Anyway, 15 games played for Jalen Hurts last year, 432 attempts. So, if you put him in this year, I did my projections for Jalen Hurts, and I put him at 499 attempts. I think that's definitely fair, because he may not get there. If he does what he did last year, he won't get there. So he might get there. Last year, he threw 16 touchdown passes. Okay. So look, at 499 attempts, if you give Dallas Goedert 100 targets, Devontae Smith 93, that's both, neither one is like super excited about that. I gave A.J. Brown 115 targets to lead the team, and there's not much left to go around. There's like, between Gainwell and Miles Sanders, I've got like 85, 90 targets. The rest of the guys are basically nothing. I mean, it just gets dissipated very, very quickly. If A.J. Brown gets 115 targets, I have him projected for 74 catches, 1,073 yards, and 6 touchdowns. I mean, he really needs to cash in on touchdowns. By the way, that would give him just under 200 fantasy points. And when I did my projections, that made him a back-end wide receiver 2. Now, I know he has upside to beat that. I get that. You could have Dallas Goedert with less and Devontae Smith with less, but someone's got to give it up. I mean, it was just hard to find targets to go around in this offense when you do projections, which is why projections are helpful. And that's why I've got very little A.J. Brown, not because I don't love him as a player, but I'm a little bit nervous about how many targets he can actually get. And now with minimal targets, if there's anybody who could just smash, it's him, but it's gonna have to happen that way, right?
I mean, that's what it comes down to, because again, and people are going to argue, because I'm not even sure what the counter argument is, to be honest with you. Is it the money?
Yeah.
Because I'm not really even sure. And the thing is, let's go big picture. If you're truly sold on Jalen Hurts, if like you love Jalen Hurts and you think that this rapport that him and A.J. Brown have is great, let's go back to the topic when we were solely discussing him. What if he's not the quarterback next year? What if it's a rookie? What if it's a guy that doesn't pan out to the same degree? What if there's any number, or it's a veteran? We have literally no idea in 2023 what this looks like. But I can tell you in 2022, it's a tough argument to make that he's going to see some prolific level of targets. Nobody in this offense did. And I think you're exactly right. Even divisionally with the targets, and it's not even a too many mouths to feed. It's just no team in history threw the ball to one guy every time, right? It's not happening. They don't do it. So they have to necessarily spread it.
Get Gabe Davis this year is possible. I mean, we're going to have to look into it. They might do it. But than that, I think you're right. It's Jerry Rice, Gabe Davis, Calvin Johnson, whatever. But listen, what we want to get to is, you're right, though. Like, ultimately, at the end of the day, there's only so many targets to go around. You look at these types of passing offenses, like in Baltimore with Mark Andrews and Rashad Bateman, there's really no third. And then we're kind of okay with those weapons. But if all of a sudden A.J. Brown was in Baltimore, we'd be like saying the same story. Yes. It's not that we don't like the players. It's just, math exists and we have to deal with it.
Yeah. Look, I don't want to exhume the corpse of this topic any further. I feel like we've both made our points. Shout outs to everybody that's joining the membership right now. Thank you guys so much. Big thank you right here.
Thank you.
My man Jax comes on and everybody, comes on to the show here to do great things, assist. I appreciate it, everybody. Thank you so much, Jax. Look, can I call you Scott? I feel like,
you can call me Scott.
We're on that level. I'd like to call you Scott. I also want to ask you this. It's mid-show. Where did the Jax thing come from?
Is that right? You want me to tell that story? It's a good one. So when I told you, right, you asked me how I got my start on Twitter.
Yes.
I got my start on Twitter because I wasn't trying to be anybody. I was just trying to look for information. Well, for that reason, I used an alias because I was like, I'm not trying to communicate with my friends on here. Like, I'm not looking for buddies. I'm just trying to, learn about fantasy dynasty football. So I was just like, I'll just call myself and Jax Falcone. It was an alias that I had used in the past that was kind of fun, and it's a pretty badass name. So I was like, I'll be Jax Falcone. It'll be fun as fuck. And then, excuse me, at some point when I started to do content, I was like, I'll switch it back to Scott. That's my actual name.
Right.
And people were like, where the fuck did Jax go? What the hell is this bullshit? I was like, all right, fine.
You had to stick with it.
Yeah.
Well, look, man, I've been, listen, to me, it's always been funny when my Twitter handle tumbles from the lips of like guys at CBS and NBC. And like, they're like, and we brought on you see them take a deep breath because they're like, is my fucking career on the line if I say this?
Yeah.
Okay. And they roll it out. And, I've never changed it ever. All right. Before we change subjects, I want to get this question answered from my man. That tall guy, he asked, what target share do you have for Devonta Smith? Do you have that in front of you by chance?
Yes, I do.
Love
Hold
it.
on, let me go to it.
Definitely feel like we got to get to the root of this. I'm holding on.
Sorry, guys.
You're fine.
Takes me a second.
This
Here
is
we go.
bad
Target
radio.
share. No, it is. It is bad radio, but that's okay because that tall guy deserves an answer. Damn it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's not fuck around. So I've got AJ Brown at 22%, Devontae Smith at 18%, Dallas Goedert at 19%, and I mean, somewhere in again, those are projections. It doesn't mean that they can't beat those projections, but if you turn up the dials on one guy, you have to turn it down somewhere else. There's only so much to go around, and it's funny. You look around that like Quez Watkins, 42 targets, 8%. Like, I don't know, maybe that's too high. Maybe he gets 30, but what if he gets 60 targets? I mean, I'm not saying he will, but like Zach Pascal, like 13 targets. I don't know. He might beat that. I mean, it's really, really hard to place too many targets. Now, if AJ Brown just goes out and gets 25%, Devontae Smith gets 20, and Dallas Goedert gets 22, then you can start to make a case for all these three guys. But that will be a severely low target share for literally everybody else. And you can do that. And I'll be more than happy to do that on the outer edges of what's possible. But when you think about like sort of the, maybe I'll play with it again. I mean, it's not what I think will happen, by the way. These numbers are just playing with it to try and understand what could happen. Higher or lower, you start playing with them. So it's not like I think A.J. Brown will get 22. I don't know, but I think that's fair.
Hey, stand by your numbers, man. This is what we talked about. When you get on a microphone, you got to wear it like a badge of honor, okay?
Yeah, but I'm always a range of outcomes guy, right? Like, so part of it is like I'm fading AJ a little bit because that's sort of the middle. So I don't want to have to only bet on like this amazing outcome to win with him because what if he's out a couple games and at the end of the season he only got like 89 targets or something, misses 2 games? Like, there's just a lot of ways that it can go the other way too. So you look at it and go, okay, well, if that's kind of where he's falling, and I just sort of put an average number in there, I need to really crank the dials for him to even get to like a wide receiver 1. That scares me.
Yeah. I'd say just fuck it. Turn all the dials all the way up. Because that's what happened last year with Debo Samuel. And I have since been told that Debo Samuel's 2021 season was not an outlier. You agree with that statement?
Fuck no, of course not. It's the definition of an outlier. It's the definition of an outlier. I mean, it's that simple. It doesn't. I'm one of the Debo defenders. I love Debo. I think, first of all, he's one of my favorite real life football players. Like, how do you not love Debo Samuel? But it is specifically an outlier. He had over 18 yards a catch.
Yes.
Like, yes. It's an outlier. That's what that is.
Yeah. I had looked this up too. Do you know what percentage of his overall fantasy points last season were attributed to purely rushing production?
I would take a guess at like 40%.
So 25%. 40's high, but still 25%. It's still fucking way higher than like any receiver ever. I mean, that's like
I thought he had 10 rushing touchdowns. He had 8, so that's where I was off a little bit. But like, I'm looking at it now. He had 6 receiving touchdowns, 8 rushing touchdowns. You think he's going to get 8 rushing touchdowns and 18 yards a catch this year? Those are called outlier numbers.
Right. I mean, that alone, that statement alone, the yards per catch and the rushing touchdowns alone is such a staggering threshold. Like, he set the bar so high that it's not achievable by anybody but Jamar Chase. Like, that's it. Like,
that's right.
Maybe Jamar Chase could get there, but he won't get there again. And I think one of the reasons I had mentioned this earlier is we go from Jimmy Garoppolo, a guy who was very accurate, not really the downfield guy, and he only rushed 2.5 times a game, to Trey Lance, who now rushes 11.3 times a game. You kind of brought this up before. Debo Samuel, A.J. Brown are the wide receiver ones, the fixture wide receiver ones in their offenses. I don't think that that's really debatable, right?
Nope.
But I think based on these two offenses and the volume that should be available, it kind of feels like now Brandon Ayuk and Devonta Smith are wide receiver 2s with fringe wide receiver 1 potential weeks in them, but they are certainly going to be at the mercy of these other 2 players in the offenses that they exist in.
100%. San Francisco and Philadelphia are like very, very similar. Kittle and Goddard are both very similar. Ayuk and Devontae Smith, and then Debo and AJ Brown. I mean, if you were trying to find the closest proxy to AJ Brown, it would be Debo. If you were trying to find the closest proxy to Debo, it would be AJ Brown. Like, they're so similar. And then the quarterbacks are very similar. They're both, rushing quarterbacks first, who will likely have fewer than 500 attempts and maybe fewer than 450 attempts possibly, which stifles the offense. Look, if you tell me that Debo Samuel's, this is what he got last year, 121 targets and even his 59 rush attempts, just give me all that, all of it. He'll never come close to hitting the numbers he got last year because he's not going to get 18 yards a catch and 8 rushing touchdowns with those numbers. So, yeah, he might get 121 targets again. He's not going to get 59 rushing attempts again, is he? Like, right? Like, they've had conversations. Look, don't give me 60 rushing attempts. So you can put it in perspective, the previous 2 years he's played, he had 14 and 8 rushing attempts. Last year, 59. Again, total outlier usage in season, and it's not happening again. And look, that doesn't mean he's not a good player, but he's definitely a bad value at his ADP.
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly a stud, but what's really crazy, what's the most psychopathic part of what's happening in San Francisco is this guy, if this was a video game, his fragility rating would be a 165. Yeah. Like, you want to put him in the most volatile, compromising fucking positions and run this guy nearly 60 times and break his back in the course of a year. And what's really interesting to me is I could argue that this might be one of the most loaded offenses, if not the most loaded offense in the league, with Kittle when he's healthy, Ayuk, Elijah Mitchell's been, I'm not a huge fan, but talented enough. And then Samuel with Trey Lance. Like, there are a lot of weapons. Any given defense is going to truly struggle to defend this team. And one of the other things that we didn't talk about with Trey Lance, but I figured it would come up now, is we don't even know who the hell he's going to favor. I mean, we don't know who his targets are going to be. It's not like Debo Samuel has a big fucking money bag floating over his head, and they're just like, every time look at Debo and throw him the ball a lot because we're paying him a lot of money. Like, Kittle could be the guy, if he can stay healthy. Brandon Ayuk is clearly talented. Like, they drafted Ayuk at one point. People favored Ayuk in this group. So it's just weird how, again,
you realize all the people watching this right now are like, say Danny Gray, say Danny Gray, say Danny Gray.
Not saying Danny Gray. You already said it. What did you do? Did you do projections for Danny Gray?
It doesn't exist.
No. Okay. Okay. Fair enough. I mean, he's not on many of my rosters, but again, this is an ultra deep team. So I think we can agree. The statement that Debo Samuel's 2021 season was not an outlier is, in fact, a bold and inaccurate statement. You agree?
Yes.
Okay.
Totally.
Tyreek Hill will outproduce Jaylen Waddle. Do you agree?
Dude, I've been saying that. I've been saying this from the beginning that, this is, thank you. When they signed Tyreek Hill, I was like, that's bad for Tyreek Hill. And everybody's like, this is terrible for Jaylen Waddle. And I'm like, well, is it? I mean, it's not good for Jaylen Waddle, but I feel like it was worse for Tyreek Hill than it was for Jaylen Waddle. Like, Tyreek Hill is losing Patrick Mahomes.
Yes.
That's what Tyreek Hill's losing.
Yes.
Jaylen Waddle's in the same situation he was last year, just with a better wide receiver on the other side of him. I mean, he's still going to play his role, and there's going to be a much, 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 much better player alongside of him. But I think Jaylen Waddle is still going to be hyper targeted in the same ways he was hyper targeted last year. I don't feel like they're used exactly the same. They're certainly both going to be on the field all the time. I just think it's I don't know. Like, I think I said, maybe you'll agree with this. Like, if I were handicapping it, I'd say like it's like a 51 or 52% chance that Jaylen Waddle will outscore Tyreek Hill this year. Like, I feel barely like that. But if you told me one of them was the wide receiver 1 overall, that's like a 90% chance it's Tyreek Hill. You know what I mean? So I feel like he has a higher ceiling, but like Waddle has the more like sort of, I just feel like I know what I'm going to get with him. I feel like he's a very steady, reliable, dependable target for Tua. And I feel like they know what they're doing and they know what they're getting from him, if that makes sense.
I have two additional thoughts about this. My first question is the statement that Tyreek Hill will outproduce Jaylen Waddle. How much of that is founded in the contracts? How much of that is how much they just paid him? Question number one.
From me, I don't know. Was that rhetorical?
I don't know. You're answering it.
I don't know. I don't know what that means. I don't know. Like, you're saying that when people say that, are they saying that because of the contract?
Yeah. Like, I'm wondering.
No, I think they're saying it because of name brand. Because it's like Tyreek Hill. That's what I think.
He got a monster yeah.
They just take Tyreek Hill and they remember all the Tyreek Hill awesomeness and they just it's going to happen in Miami.
Okay, and
I don't know that.
With that being said, here was my take on Jaylen Waddle all last year. Loved Jaylen Waddle as a prospect. Thought he was a better prospect than Devonta Smith. Whatever. Here we are 2 years later. I fully stand behind that situation. But when I looked at his production last year, everybody focused on his ADOT, which was very clearly irrelevant because his collegiate yards per reception were a fucking mile down the field. But when we looked at Tua Tagovailoa, he had one of the lowest times to throw, one of the worst offensive lines. So here's my question. What do people assume Tyreek Hill is going to do successfully in Miami?
Hey, remember how you said what was Danny Gray's projection? By the way, Debo Samuel 117 targets, George Kittle 105, Brandon Ayuk 90. I just looked at it. It's like the same. It's like the same as the AJ Brown 115, Goddard 100, and Devontae Smith 93. Like they're all right there. And by the way, Danny Gray 30 targets, 18 catches, 216 yards, and a touchdown. I mean, whatever. Who knows?
Give him a touchdown. Charitable.
Thank you. You're welcome. Anyway, back to the question.
Yes,
what were you asking me? Something about Jaylen Waddle's.
Well, what I was asking
you're trying to go back and revisit the fact that you said Jaylen Waddle was better than Devontae Smith.
So first off,
be right about it.
So what I did was I was right about it. Oh, number one. Number two, a little dice clay for you. Number two. My point is, Tyreek Hill is essentially being brought to Miami to do exactly what Jaylen Waddle was not given the opportunity to do last year, right? Sure. And I think that Tyreek Hill is a unicorn in his own right. Like, I think that what he does on an NFL field is you cannot replicate in Jaylen Waddle. It doesn't exist.
Or anybody else. Right?
Or anybody else in the league. It doesn't exist in the league. So with that being said, obviously you're trying to get the ball in his hands on any given play. But the idea that he's going to blow the doors off Waddle after what we saw from him in his rookie year, it's a really difficult statement to make because how often do guys with the draft capital of Waddle and the rookie year production of Waddle not continue to be great players in the league? I think it's a more rare case than the guy who doesn't fire initially that we're waiting on. Like, okay, this is going to be the year. We've already seen it from Waddle. So it's a difficult thing for me to agree with that statement. But I think to your point, you said that, what was your percentage of odds? It's close.
Yeah, like 52 to 48, like Waddle outscores them. Like, in other words, I think they're going to be very close if I had to guess, which is why I prefer Waddle because Tyreek goes like a round or a round and a half earlier than him in most redraft leagues. So I'd rather just get Waddle and, take that profit. But, excuse me, it's like we've never seen a really elite player go from a team where he was dominant and then have a shit year like, I don't know, Randy Moss.
Yeah, right.
Remember that?
Right.
He went Minnesota to the Raiders, and then he set the record again going back to New England. Sometimes these situations just don't work out. And I would ask chicken or egg, right? It's like Tua last year had the least amount of time to throw. He had a bad offensive line. Yes. He didn't throw the ball downfield. This is all true.
Yes.
Now that the offensive line is quote-unquote fixed, which maybe it is, and let's say that it is. Yet to be determined. Let's say that it's all better. Okay? Like this.
Okay. Yeah, that easy.
Perfect.
Okay.
Done. Let's say that's true.
Yes.
Was it the offensive line or was it Tua? Still to be determined, right? Like, will Tua stand in there and throw the ball down the field? Don't know. And what did Tyreek Hill benefit from in Kansas City? He benefited from a big, strong-arm quarterback who would stand in there or scramble and evade stuff and throw the ball downfield. That's what he was afforded. And because he's so fast and so dynamic down the field, they would have a few big plays per season. Certainly, almost won a game. You'd be like waiting for it, right?
Yeah.
And that's what was so great about Tyreek Hill as a fantasy asset. If those are mitigated or taken away completely, well, we'll see.
I think that the difficult thing here is that we're also removing years of chemistry. It's not like Tyreek year one was Tyreek year four.
Sure.
So we're not getting that year one either. So I totally am on board. I think that Tyreek is, you can't replicate him in the league. I think that he's going to be an explosive weapon in this offense. I think it's going to be a lot closer than people think. I think that both of these guys playing together hurt both of their dynasty stocks. I think the contract that Tyreek got hurt Waddle in that sense because he's not going anywhere. From a production argument, we can have a different one. But from a, hey, this elite, irreplicatable talent is not going anywhere. That was a hard word. Try and say it.
It may not be a word, actually.
Somebody look that up for me.
Irreplicatable?
Hardest word. You did it, man. You did it flawlessly. I got to stop drinking this coffee. I'm getting jittery. With that being said, I can see them being close, but I think blowing the doors off is a little crazy. But I got to go to that tall guy because he's got some very disparaging statements in the chat. Jaylen Waddle is trash. 0% chance Waddle outscores Hill. And finally, I watched every Jaylen Waddle target from last year, and it wanted to make me puke.
I think I lost a follower.
I think that's harsh right there. That's a little harsh.
I'm sorry I answered your question now. Jeez.
Yeah. No, man. Anytime if you're a member of the listener's circle, priority right to the front. All right. I want to get to Gabe Davis because you love Gabe Davis, but this is
coming after me after this
one. But this is a cold water segment, so you can't be so complimentary about Gabe Davis. You have to take off your truther mask and hang up your Gabe Davis jersey or whatever, a comforter on your bed, underpants, even better. Keep him as close to you as humanly possible. Is there any chance, and this is the statement, that Gabe Davis is in fact a game-changing talent?
He's not a game-changing talent.
Oh, boy.
He's not.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I mean, he just isn't. I've said this before. I think he's a good player in a great situation. And that works. That works just fine. It's worked many, many times in the past, and I think that's what he is. And he's probably a good or a little bit better than good player in a probably potentially outstanding situation. So if he's a good player in an outstanding situation, that's really good. So it's basically just how good a player is he times how good the situation is, right?
Yeah.
And so those who are really off him a bit are saying that he's a average to slightly below average player. Because I don't think anybody in their right mind thinks he's not a good player or, not an average wide receiver, obviously. Sure. So I think, you know what I mean? Like, that would be a very outside the norm take. I think even Drew Oshansky, who's like the, however you say his last name, bulletproof bean count or whatever, he's out there saying that Gabe Davis is going to fall flat on his face, which I think is more brave than what I'm saying, which is like he's going to go for like 1,000 yards and 8 to 10 touchdowns, which is like, I don't know, how could he not? But I don't think he gets there because he's a, what did you call him? Game-changing talent.
Yes.
Like, I don't think that that's exactly what he is. I think he's a good player, a very good downfield player in an outstanding downfield offense.
I gotta say, I've got to get Drew a shout out here because this is one thing that really grinds my gears. Again, this is what really irks me out in the world of fantasy analysis. I think it's really easy to get behind athletic, late-round talents and claim that they're going to make a roster or they're going to cut their way into a starting lineup. That doesn't take balls. It's not difficult. We already knew that those guys probably were not. And when they don't, you just go, well, it didn't work out. The odds were stacked against them. The organization doesn't know what they're doing. The NFL draft fucked it up. It takes balls to say that Gabe Davis, who everybody is in love with, is going to fall flat on his face. That's taking a fucking stand. And I applaud Drew for that because there's nobody doing that. Everybody's taking, the cotton candy road, which is, we're going to name some names here in a few minutes. Oh, this player is going to fire because, look, athletic profile meets made a roster, so he's going to be a Hall of Famer, and it doesn't work like that. So anyways, shout outs to Drew. I'm kind of in the opinion of Gabe Davis that I don't think that Gabe Davis is a game-changing talent by any means, but I think that what he does well is going to be an excellent fit in Buffalo. He's a downfield explosive threat that's got the juice, the yards after the catch capability, and that's all Josh Allen really needs. He's got the technician in Stephon Diggs who also offers that skill set. You just need the hammer. You need big Tyreek Hill in a way, like this guy that's going to take the top off, big explosive plays, just make defenses really aware of him. And even if the guy only ends up with 105 targets this year and he's wide receiver 27, in terms of what Buffalo's asking for, that's a fucking superstar to them, right? That's all they want. So
absolutely.
So Gabe Davis,
absolutely.
Not a game-changing talent. That's where I'm going to stand on that. Thank you, Matt Moore. Thank you very much. I feel great about that. But also cold water because I don't think that he's a top 12 wide receiver. I've heard people say that him and Diggs could both finish as wide receiver ones, and I'm just not on board with that. That just go ahead.
I'll say that. I mean, I'll say that that's possible for sure. I mean,
okay.
It reminds me. Look, I've said that the Gabe Davis ascension reminds me of Chris Godwin light. I think Chris Godwin is a better player than Gabe Davis. He's a better prospect, all that. But he was a 3rd-round pick. And he was a guy who started slow his rookie season. And he was a guy who got more playing time his second year. Honestly, I thought that Gabe Davis could have maybe had that type of second year had they not signed Emmanuel Sanders. It's clear that he had some good play in him, a la fucking playoff game where he has 4 touchdowns. It's not like, that's not a fluke. I mean, he's a pretty prolific touchdown scorer in that offense. So, like, literally consistently since he's been in Buffalo, he's been able to score touchdowns at a very, very good rate, and then did so at an incredible rate in the playoffs. So if that is sticky, which I know people say, well, touchdowns aren't sticky. It's like, well, kind of. They're fucking sticking to DJ Moore pretty well. So I think touchdown scoring is a little bit sticky. Yes, they can be a little bit up and down for sure, but a guy who's good at scoring touchdowns is good at scoring touchdowns. Why? Because he plays downfield in a pass attack. Now, I was going to say, imagine being a defender against Buffalo. Right. Like, Josh Allen is so scary. He's so scary
on his own
because like if you're a safety or a linebacker or whatever, and you're just like play pass and you're like trying to take away Davis and Diggs down the field, he's just going to take off and rip 20 like every time. Josh Allen is bigger and stronger and faster. He's just going to rip 20, 25 yards. So all those safeties and linebackers are sort of peaking. They're peaking for Josh Allen taking off. They need to kind of hold their ground. They're sometimes on their toes leaning forward rather than retreating, trying to take away that deep ball. And then he's got what I think is the best arm in terms of power in the NFL. So he can get it downfield fast. It's not just downfield. He can get it downfield very, very quickly. And so he can beat safeties to the spot. And when you've got a guy like Gabe Davis who's beating guys downfield, and he's a pretty darn good contested catch guy, it's just a really good match. And so for that reason, I think you can pencil in Stephon Diggs for 150 targets right now, like literally write it in black magic marker, 150 targets or more. Easy. And then it's like, if Gabe Davis somehow can get, and we've had this conversation before, Nate, if he can get to 120, 130, I agree with you. 105 is, sure, that's fine. Maybe 80 to 105 is almost a guarantee. But if somehow all of a sudden, he's a little bit better than we think, he's earning a few more targets, if he can get to 120, 130 with his touchdown upside, it's possible that they both end up as a top 12 wide receiver. I'm not saying it's likely. I'm saying it's possible.
I mean, he had 63 targets last year. So if we basically just double his numbers, that would have been 70 catches, about 1,100 receiving yards and 12 touchdowns.
Yep.
So, I mean, no, I think
that's
it's
how
entirely,
you get there.
Yeah, I think it's entirely possible. It was a great point. So Dawson Knox got a contract extension today, 4 years, $56 million.
Good for him.
Yeah. So obviously Buffalo appreciates the talent there. I think all these pieces do necessarily work against guys like Gabe a little bit and some of these other weapons out of the backfield. But nonetheless, I think breaking 100 targets is absolutely in the works. Game-changing talent, probably not. But in terms of what Buffalo needs, brings an absolute thread to this offense that is very dynamic and special.
I think to answer his question, I think the Dawson Knox James Cook situation could stifle Gabe Davis, right? If all of a sudden Isaiah McKenzie, Dawson Knox, James Cook are getting like just a good number of targets, and all of a sudden Gabe Davis falls in that 80 to 90 target, that's a problem.
Yeah.
At his ADP, right?
Jeremy Clark, 100 targets is nearly a lock. I'm on board with it. I'm on board with it. I can see it. The question was game-changing talent. Guys, it's a cold water episode, for God's sakes. It's cold water. I'm sorry, okay?
And we're talking about my Bay. That's the most cold water I can throw on Gabe.
God, at least he got on board. He wasn't like ultra complimentary. I appreciate that. Was very Drew of you. Okay, like you stepped out of your comfort zone. You did something that was brave, and so kudos to you. Let's do another brave choice. Of course, at age 29, Cooper Kupp is a top 10 dynasty wide receiver. You and I talked about this pre-show. You had a very great point about Cooper Kupp. Go ahead.
Yeah, you were asking me. You're like, hey, do you have him ranked in your top 10 dynasty wide receivers? And I was like, yeah. Why? Oh, it's on the show. And I went, oh yeah. And it's like, I don't think I'm ever drafting him there or paying that price though. So while I understand like you kind of have to rank them there, I don't really like that value, mainly just because in Dynasty. Now, if we're just talking Dynasty, it's like, I don't know, he's 29, and I don't know how many more years you're going to get of elite Cooper Kupp. And let me ask you this: how many years of elite Cooper Kupp have we had in the first however many years he's been in the league?
Not nearly as many as people think.
Right? One or two?
Yeah.
Like last year
one was truly elite.
And then I think he had one other top 10 finish or something like that. I'm not looking.
I think
my
so.
agent's texting me the answer, but I can look. But that's it, right?
I wasn't looking. I thought that, hey, you were talking. I thought that you had this pulled up. He's got one. Yeah, he does. He had a top 7 finish 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and then number 1 overall. So, it exists. Absolutely. I think that the problem is that the age thing is sort of being stripped away a little bit. I think, people love to write articles and cite articles that talk about age apex, and then they just like to take that shit and much like whatever else I threw out the window earlier, they throw it out right next to it because they're like, well, fucking man, this guy is going to play forever. And I would make an argument that a guy in the slot probably has the opportunity to have some longevity, especially we saw it with like Edelman and Brady. This rapport with Matt Stafford, the longevity of that could drive his value in Dynasty on for a while. And he could be productive over the next couple of years. But again, at the price, I don't know that I want to pay, wide receiver 6 or 7 price tag for this guy.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, I'm just looking in one league I'm in, and he was drafted before the 2021 season. This is a pretty good value, but he was drafted at the 7-10 in a startup.
Okay.
So it was a 7th round startup pick. And that was on the heels of a season where he'd played 15 games, had 124 targets, but only had 974 yards and 3 touchdowns. Last year, he basically doubled that. He had 1,900 yards. So it's like that's an outlier season as well. I mean, just his yards, 869, 566, 1161, 974, and then 1947. So I think we've seen an outlier season from him. 94 targets, 55 targets, he was hurt. 134, 124, and then 191. So I think he's more of a 140, 150 target guy this year, which would be an awesome year. I think he's going to be awesome, but I don't think I'm willing to chase. It's kind of like point chasing in DFS, right? It's like the year after. It's not like he's just definitely going to do it again. I mean, think about last year. We had Robert Woods ahead of Cooper Kupp and Brandon Ayuk ahead of Debo Samuel. We think we're so fucking smart. And then these guys, do it, and they're like, well, that's it. He's the guy who's going to do it again. And they don't, because that's just not how it works.
That's my whole argument for Juju. We had guys like Debo Samuel and Cooper Kupp. They were ranked as the wide receiver 24, wide receiver 30, and then suddenly, after 2 incredible years, now they're both routinely in Dynasty top 10s, but they were 14 to 20 spaces lower than that previously. It's just funny what a year can change. So when we look at these players, the difference can be so evident in such a short period of time. I want to name an older player because I used him for the graphic, and I have to bring this player up. Davante Adams. So the statement that was made to me was Davante Adams will post a historical fantasy season. Do you agree?
No, not at all. Why? I don't even understand why that would be a thought. I mean, I'm just hoping that he's able to hang on to some of that touchdown upside because, I mean, I think he's awesome. But, we don't know what it looks like with Derek Carr. And like I said, same thing with, we've never seen a wide receiver change teams, go to the Raiders and suck. Randy Moss, Amari Cooper. Sorry, Raiders.
Yeah.
But it's true. These guys were like surefire, can't miss when they got him, right? I mean, there was no chance Randy Moss was going to fail. He did. There was no chance that, Amari Cooper was going to do what he did when he got there and he shit the bed. So I'm not saying Davante Adams is either of those two guys, obviously. I mean, he's in between those guys. I mean, obviously. But I think there's just no sure thing that he's just going to walk in there and do what he's done with Check's notes, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time.
Right. Well, the other thing, too, is how much of this is just an assumed rapport from 9 years ago at Fresno State? It's like a dog gets separated from its owner for like 3 years and they just automatically remember each other. It's like, I don't think that that's the case. Like, it makes me nervous. And I went looking for a guy that was, was generally the same age, that had entered a new situation and tried to find like the best case scenario for fantasy points. And I flashed back to Brandon Marshall at age 31, went to the Jets for his first year and averaged 21.2 fantasy points per game at age 31. The next season, 10.8 fantasy points per game. Over the next 2 years, he played just 11 games and retired from the league. So again, we totally ignore the age apex. I mean, yeah, and Julio's another example of these guys that were unstoppable at age 28, 29, 30. They get to 31, 32, the wheels fall off more times than not. And it's not like we're seeing Davante Adams, his role running out of the slot super frequently or anything like that. So I just have concerns with his ranking in Dynasty. Now, I don't necessarily know where you have him, but I would imagine it's a lot like Cooper Kupp, where if you own him, short of selling him for something that's worth it, you're just going to ride this one out because you really don't want to pay the price tag for Davante Adams. But if we go back and look at the historical production of wide receivers, at age 32, 33, 34, these aged wideouts, every name that you see that was productive was an elite player, right? It's the Larry Fitzgeralds, it's the Andre Johnsons, it's the, Reggie Waynes. All these guys stick around. And I would argue that Davante Adams is that talented, but are you willing to take the bet that we get 3 more years of this guy?
Yeah, no, I'm not willing to take that bet. And I think you can probably get off Davante, which is why I'm fine. I have him at wide receiver 9. But it's funny because if you look at, I'll just start sharing some of my, rankings. So it's like Chase, Jefferson, Lamb, A.J. Brown, T. Higgins. I feel like those 5 guys are the young guys that are we're sure they're good, And then it's guys that are getting old or had somewhat of an outlier season. And it's like Cooper Kupp, Diggs, Debo, Davante. And it's like, I don't love Debo there. I don't ever want to be drafting any of those guys. I have him ranked there, but I feel like that group of guys is not I almost want to put Rashad Bateman up there. I'm not going to take Rashad Bateman, with the WR6 pick in a startup, but I'd much rather sort of have him. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely.
I'd rather do something else, trade back, move around, and get to that spot. I couldn't, people look at our website. I couldn't be like, Bateman 6. They'd be like, what the fuck, this guy?
Right. It seems fraudulent.
It's stupid. So, but as I look at it, if you're asking advice, it's like, no, I don't really want these guys. That's why I'm starting to push them down. And also, this is Dynasty Game Theory 101. It's like, if you just take today's rankings and just try and imagine what they'll be at the end of the season, literally next off season, going into the 2023 rookie draft. There's no way these guys are going to hold that value. They're going to fall down. And I don't know which ones, but Michael Pittman, Jaylen Waddle, DJ Moore, Drake London, Rashad Bateman, right? All these guys, you keep going down. Some of these guys are going to move up and they're going to have a big season. I don't know which ones they are. We don't know. Drake London, if he goes out and puts up 120 targets, 900 yards and 7 touchdowns, that's pretty good. We're going to be like, oh, dude's awesome. He's moving up, right? Because we're going to picture him in his 22-year-old season to be even better than that, and so forth and so on. So, even guys like Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, there's just a lot of guys in that sort of, DK Metcalf, Cortland Sutton, Deontay Johnson. So I don't know who's better, but I think that's a big, meaty tier that I'd rather be picking a few guys at the backside than, spending up for any of these guys. So if I could trade Davante Adams for Cortland Sutton plus, sure, why not? Just do it, because there's a possibility Cortland Sutton actually outscores Davante Adams this year and forever on.
Yeah.
Not likely, but possible. And then you still have the profit to take with you.
I think the one thing with rankings, and this has always been my philosophy on rankings, people go, well, how can rankings always change? How can they adjust? Here's my take on rankings. As the guy that's doing the rankings, I create them in such a way, the minute that you're looking at them, you're stepping into a startup draft. I'm giving you the value in this very moment, because we might be high on a guy entering week 1 and Gabe Davis, let's say, and he may not produce at all first 5 weeks. Now he suddenly goes from the wide receiver 27 to the wide receiver 56. And you go, well, what the hell, man? You had him ranked higher earlier in the year. You convinced me he was good. And it's like, we have to be fluid with the rankings. But if I was stepping into a startup today, that's where I would value him. And that's kind of how I've always done my rankings, which are not public yet.
Me too.
So I just, at least you've got the courtesy and the courage to go ahead and put those out there for all the people on the internet, all the good listeners. But I think at some point you're probably going to move Bateman way up there. Yes. Here's a player that I want to ask you if you're going to move up there. And this is the last wide receiver we're probably going to mention. And this was a statement that was made to me. Is Michael Pittman elite?
No.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Are you just flat out not a fan of Pittman? Do you think that what we've seen is a mirage? What's your take on Pittman? Where's the cold water?
Well, I think, we are like, if Pittman were in one of these situations, like, I'll put Pittman, replace any of the 3 wide receivers in Pittsburgh. You'd be like, he's just, I don't know, he'd be somewhat muted by some of the other talent there. Whether he's there instead of Claypool, it's like, well, is he better than Deontay Johnson? Is he going to get more targets? I think it's the runway a little bit with him. I think he's a little bit like Gabe Davis. I'm not saying he's not as good as Gabe or better or whatever, but I'm just saying, like, there's that opportunity that's showing itself, because it's like, if you ask the average player, the average fantasy gamer to name the other players, the other wide receivers in Indianapolis, they'd go, T.Y. Hilton?
Right.
Who the fuck's over there? It's like they don't know, because we don't know. I mean, I guess it's going to be Paris Campbell. We don't know. We're like, yeah. I mean, I know it's Ashton Doolin and I call him Trash Can, but these other guys, Alec Pierce.
Trash Can, jeez, dude. I think you're right. I mean, it's fair, because I don't think a lot of people will like juxtaposition
no tight end.
A scenario. Yeah, they don't. They're not willing to go, okay, if I moved him from here over to here, would he be relevant or would he blend into the mix? Right. Admittedly, this is a hard one for me, because I actually like Michael Pittman. And part of the reason I talked to Cody Carpentier on this show a couple of weeks ago, he didn't win the money either. And when I was talking to him on this show, we talked about his process of using route win rate and these advanced, performance metrics on the field. And one thing about Pittman was just winning. He was flat out winning early and often. And now he steps into a situation with Matt Ryan. And it's difficult for me to not assume that he's going to be really good in this offense. But if I was going to pour cold water on it, I would say, if your assumption is that what we saw him try to do with Calvin Ridley the year prior on a team that has a run game, on a team that has an offensive line, on a team that has weapons that we really don't know how good or bad or how they'll jive with the situation are, then that may be a fallacy that you're falling for, because maybe he doesn't see, 10, 12 targets a game routinely. It's a hard argument to make, because Matt Ryan has routinely fixated himself on one receiver. And as far as I know, and I'm sure as far as you know, or anybody in this audience, that guy in this offense is Michael Pittman.
I think Michael Pittman's really good, by the way. You said, what was the question exactly? I think you said, is he elite something like that?
Is he elite?
Yeah,
he's not elite. Okay. No, I would agree.
I just don't think he is, I don't think he will be. I don't think he's elite, but that doesn't mean that I don't think that he's pretty good. All right. Put it this way. I was in a draft just recently, and it came to me, and I was taking a wide receiver at this spot, and it was Michael Pittman or T. Higgins. And I think everybody's taking Pittman. Do you take Pittman?
Pittman or T. Higgins?
Yeah, this year, just 1 year, right now.
No, I'd go Higgins. I'd still go Higgins.
Me too.
Yeah.
I picked Higgins, and it was tough. And of course, Pittman went immediately after they were both going to go next, and it's like, okay, well, is Higgins elite?
No, I don't think Higgins is elite. I think as a fan, so it's a hard argument. I don't think he's elite.
If T. Higgins were in Indianapolis and Pittman were in Cincinnati, who would you then take? I would take Higgins way over Pittman, right?
Yeah, for sure. You would take Higgins way over Pittman. I think that's the case, though, with Higgins. I think that he's not elite in terms of wide receiver. Like, Jamar Chase is elite. I don't think Higgins is elite, but I think Higgins is incredibly good. And as a function in the offense that he's in, like Gabe Davis in Buffalo, Higgins is going to get a boatload of opportunity. Yes. He gets the opportunity to have Jamar Chase shredding secondaries. You've got a solid run game. You have a quarterback that is going to be around for a long time. That's the difference here. Matt Ryan could be a stopgap too. We don't really know. Yeah. And And production oftentimes can be hinged on the quarterback, short of it being volume, right? I mean, you look at DeAndre Hopkins, it was a lot of volume helping drive some of that early production. Obviously, he was an incredibly talented receiver, but if you put a good quarterback with a talented receiver and they build the rapport, then you get that production. But if the quarterback's no good, then it's immensely about the volume. And I just don't know what the future here looks like. It was Rivers, the year prior. Now we've got Matt Ryan. It's this constant shuffle. And is Ryan going to be the long-term answer? I don't know. By the advanced metrics, Ryan doesn't look dead by any means. And his target usage towards Calvin Ridley was exceptional. And prior to that, it was Julio Jones and Roddy White, and take your pick, like all these guys. So is he elite? No. Can he be a top 12 fantasy finisher? Absolutely. He was 9 points short of finishing as the wide receiver 12 overall last year. So he was almost already a wide receiver 1 last year in season-long total points. So I would agree he's not. We got to get to some running backs. I mean, we're going to go late into the night here if we don't switch to running backs ASAP.
Let's go.
Here's a statement. 2021 DeAndre Swift equals 2022 Travis Etienne.
Yes, but not really. Like, I think it's yes, but he's got a foot injury. I think he's got a little bit less, certainty of talent. Like, I'm less sure of Etienne for a variety of reasons that are make me a little bit less sure of him than I was of DeAndre Swift last year. And I wasn't all that sure. I missed DeAndre Swift a little bit, mainly because, but I learned from it. I learned that those targets are super important. What I missed with DeAndre Swift last year, I'm not going to miss with a guy like Aaron Jones this year, or even Etienne. And that's why I'm on Etienne. So I think process-wise, yes, because I think he should, we just don't know, but should get a lot of targets. And if he does, that's enough to tether him to a solid RB2 season. And if he's able to score touchdowns and be effective as a rusher, then the very, very high ceiling in that offense.
And I think that's what really never gets mentioned in his profile. Like when you compare him to DeAndre Swift, that's been the one thing that's missing, is we wanted to see the rushing volume with it, but we've seen the success of Austin Eckler and Aaron Jones. Like, you don't necessarily need a lot of rushing volume to be a dominant fantasy asset, especially with the injuries that come along with it. But with Travis Etienne, one of the fundamental differences here is people keep talking about James Robinson, who, correct me if I'm wrong, is a free agent at the end of this year. So I think he's actually gone end of this year. Now, whether they re-sign him on the cheap, I have no idea. They very likely could. I mean, he seems like the right fit to play there behind, Travis Etienne. But one of the a tweet that I put out earlier in the year, I was looking at basically trail rates of teams. Like, how often are you trailing? And Detroit was trailing on 65% of their plays last year, which is crazy. But I believe Jacksonville trailed on 75% of their plays. So with Trevor Lawrence already leading the NFL as the only guy, I believe, in double digits of check down rate, I think it was 11.3%. The rapport with Travis Etienne, the receiving capabilities, the prolific profile. I think, yes, he equals 2021 DeAndre Swift in a different way, like you said. I'm not sure that he's going to be throttled on the rushing volume quite as much. I think if he proves he can do it and he can handle the workload, I think they're going to give him the opportunity to do it. Now, I realize this is not cold water. I've beat the drum for Travis Etienne. I put myself in a corner with this question because I don't know how to put cold water on him. How do you put cold water on him?
Well, I think the injury, number one, the uncertainty in the offense, and James Robinson. I mean, James Robinson is a guy who can at least rush the football, where and he can take some passing down snaps, so he can just eat in there a little bit more than you'd like him to, and then all of a sudden you've got a situation where you've got a muted player in Travis Etienne who's giving you everything you want, but just at a volume level that doesn't really pay off. Can I ask you this though? So Cam Akers is being okay, perfect. Yes.
So Cam Akers is being like hurled down boards because he comes back quickly, which was miraculous, from an Achilles tendon tear, faces 3 top 10 rush defenses out of the final 4 games that he plays, and then doesn't look so great by the raw counting numbers rather than people looking at the actual volume that they were willing to give him. Now he falls way down the ranks. But a guy like James Robinson, who's coming off of the exact same injury, is sort of being, this is why I tweeted this the other day and got a bunch of backlash. And I actually saw you, this was hilarious. I feel this way. Anytime somebody comes at me on Twitter in a sideways fashion, as soon as I click on them, they don't follow me. They never follow me. Right? Is that the same for you?
Yes.
God.
Someone said something. I just tweeted it today.
I saw it
a minute ago. Yeah, I was like, I would have bet $10,000 you don't follow me. It's just for sure.
It was exactly my sentiment as well. But I basically had this tweet that said James Robinson is being afforded, the most incredible level of what's the word I'm looking for here? I'm totally stymied.
I'm not going to help you out.
I'm losing the word.
Help you out.
Benefit of the doubt. Come on, chat. Yeah. Somebody, God, you're no help. Chat's not helping me.
Chat.
So what is the chat? Who's got the fastest guam?
I wanted
to
see how long it would take you. I wanted to let you hang there.
I'm back on the track. No, but what I'm saying is that people are back on board with James Robinson. We haven't seen him. We don't know what he's going to look like after the Achilles tendon tear. I feel like we've just had so many now that people are starting to play the probability game like, well, they can't all ruin careers. Like that feels like the direction that we've headed. But nonetheless, the cold water on ETN is very clearly, as Brady said, James Robinson's abilities in the goal line as a pass catcher. His first year in the league was excellent. Look, I don't have a beef with James Robinson. You can't find a tweet where I was crapping on James Robinson. You can, however, find a video clip where I had predicted Travis Etienne getting drafted to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And that was
on my podcast. We predicted that on my podcast as well.
Did we?
Yes,
man,
we did.
Listen, I can't even remember these things, but it makes sense, right? This is a perfect, and this is a great example because we're going to get to some other running backs here in a second. An undrafted free agent has an incredible season and gets fucking backstopped by a first-round running back like that quickly. And I understand the coaching staff was trash, okay? We can't hold any of that against them, but it was just a brutal situation altogether. But nonetheless, it's food for thought when talking about these very late-round athletic running backs. I'm sure we're going to get to some. How about Leonard Fournette? I've heard that Leonard Fournette has zero risk.
I don't think that. Is there a running back with zero risk? I mean, always the running backs are basically always at risk of getting hurt, which I think is the first thing that they're at risk of doing is getting hurt. So every running back is built in with that inherent risk. So saying any running back comes with zero risk is basically a fallacy to begin with.
Right.
I think the veteran deference that he'll receive will be, assured. But there is also risk that Mr. Rachaad White is just fucking awesome. There's a possibility. What's that? 10%, 15%? There's 5%. I mean, some number. I mean, I love him. So I think that there's a possibility that Rachaad White is fucking awesome. If Rachaad White is awesome,
yes,
then Leonard Fournette is at risk of not returning value at ADP because Rachaad White will just be like more and more and more and more opportunities as the year goes on, bigger and bigger plays, more and more trust, and Leonard Fournette's a part-time player.
You absolutely nailed it. This was the cold water for me as well. It's like they're already talking about scaling Leonard Fournette back a little bit, which was a signal when they took Rachaad White in the third round anyways. Issues with his age, with the health of this wide receiver group, and then the addition of Rachaad White to me, it cannot be ignored. I had this tweet earlier in the year. Here was the tweet. Mark Ingram was coming off an RB8 season at age 27 when the Saints drafted Alvin Kamara in the third round. Same exact fucking situation is playing itself out right now. He's entering his age 27 and a half season, and in Dynasty, all bets are off at the running back position. I mean, again, we're just like flat out ignoring the age apex in many regards with these receivers, with these running backs. I understand that the situation is ripe. It's very ripe in Tampa Bay with injuries, previous production, Tom Brady at quarterback, but to ignore Rachaad White's potential in this offense, to ignore him spelling Leonard Fournette or even finding routes on the field as a receiving option, like we have no idea like how diverse this offense could be. So I think we both agree any running back, there's absolute risk. Leonard Fournette, there could be more risk than I think people are actually counting right now.
Yeah, there's very little risk in that offense. That offense should be dope. It's going to pass a million times. That's a fun one to do. You want to do some projections. That's a fun one to do because it's just like you give like someone like a 14% target share and they have like 90 targets. You're like, oh, that's fucking fantastic. I mean, you look at Gage, Julio, Evans, and Godwin, and they're all like, you can get them if you fuck around with it. You can get them all to 100 targets. Not that I did, but you're like, oh my God, that's possible.
Right.
Like this is actually possible, because that's 400, by the way.
Yeah.
Tom Brady throws it 700 times a year.
It's ridiculous. I was looking at the Tom Brady passing attempts. I mean, it's 716 pass attempts is so over the top. It's so unreal. And this is my argument too. Like they're like, Tom Brady's arm is dead. I'm like, he just threw the ball 716 times and nobody once said, man, his arm looks like shit. And then we get to the offseason and they think like 4 months went by and his arm just like toasted. I don't know. I don't quite understand it myself.
They confuse the word arm with marriage.
Dude, yes. Man, this is my guy right here. One of my favorites. One of my favorites in the chat. Javonte Williams will overcome Melvin Gordon. He couldn't do it last year. Does he do it this year?
Yeah. I mean, this one's a tough one to pour cold water on because I think he does. I think if you look at, I made this point, I think last night as well. So you're asking me all the same questions. Why don't you just play the other fucking podcast, man?
I didn't listen to the podcast. I don't know.
Of course you didn't.
What
you don't even follow me.
What? What are these statements you're making?
All right, listen.
I do follow you, by the way.
No, of course you do. Yeah, you live with me. I mean, I'm downstairs. I don't know why we don't do this in the same room. You make me stay down here. This is ridiculous.
I'm sorry.
What I'm trying to say, it's not fair, but it's okay.
It's
you give me the shitty camera. Look at this camera. It's all just to make you look better. This is nonsense, and I'm tired of it. So next week, I want better equipment. Fair?
Okay, we'll do it. We'll upgrade you.
Fine.
Let me upgrade you.
Javonte Williams, if you were to look at last year, Javonte Williams, just tell the story. Javonte Williams was drafted as a rookie, as a 21-year-old rookie, onto a team with an established veteran running back, right?
Yep.
True. Fact. This year, Javonte Williams is the incumbent second-round draft pick who is joined by a guy who's a veteran, an aging veteran who is signed to a $2 million contract. It's just a different story. It's the same guy, but it's not the same guy. It's a different situation. They literally, when Melvin Gordon asked for money, they were like, "Yeah, no, we're gonna see what's happening." And then he's hung out in free agency. Nobody wanted him, and then finally they were like, "Yeah, you can come back." You know what I mean? So it's not the same situation. It's a different situation. And presumably the younger dope player in Javonte got better, and we would stand to reason that Melvin Gordon is starting to fade a bit. So why wouldn't they start to give that other player a little bit more? So I think it goes from this 52-48 thing that they did last year, which was infuriating, to a 60 or 65-35-40. I think Melvin Gordon still has value. It's not like they're going to just be like, fuck this guy. But I think it just shifts a little bit towards Javonte. And in some games, it's going to be Javonte all day, and he's going to have 20 carries, 150 and 2.
Yep. I'm with you. So I actually, in my notes, I wrote a 65-35 touch split because I think that's reasonable. Now, the people that don't really pay attention to snap share are probably like, that's not enough. It's going to be 80-20. Only 4 guys in 2021 saw over 70% snap share. And if he did have a 65% snap share, that's within 3.5% of Jonathan Taylor's snaps. So that would be a lot of snaps. I mean, so
it's not happening.
And Melvin Gordon was very productive. I mean, almost neck and neck with Javonte Williams last year.
He was awesome.
He was very good last year, so it's hard to believe that he's not decent this year, but I totally agree with your point. I think that, and this is great. No, Brady Miller's saying exactly what it was. This is what I was going to bring up. So Melvin Gordon did recently tell Broncos media that they want Javonte to be the guy that they're going to rotate with the first team offense with, first downs occasionally, but it's going to be Javonte's backfield for sure. And so,
it's hard to pour cold water on this, especially when you talk about the increased efficiency because they go from Drew Lock to Russell Wilson like that. You can't even, that's an incomprehensible difference.
I mean, I think Russell Wilson feels like he's had talented running backs around him, but now like the injury potential, it might be, less likely. You might have 2 guys. You just want to keep them healthy. It's a 17-game season, and this doesn't get talked about enough. Just the change in philosophy over time because teams are learning what can these guys handle at this point, right? Because 70% snap share, as I'm seeing in the chat right now, is absolutely insane and likely never happens. But nonetheless, I don't foresee that, but I think this is the year that Javonte Williams absolutely takes over. There's no cold water.
100%. Yeah, no cold water.
There's no cold water here. All right. I'm going to get you a couple more questions, and then we're going to get to this game. I wanted to ask you about...
I want my money.
You're going to have a shot at the money.
No, not this shot. I'm getting the money. Just give me the question so I can give you the answer so I can get my money.
Okay, I'll give you a shot at the money. Here it is. This is... I had a feeling. No, this is not it. This is a phone call. I listened to the chat. Is that my agent? No, this is not your agent. I did think, though, that if I don't pick this thing up, that it'll just stop. But that's the problem with this thing. It'll just keep ringing. So I'm going to answer this. This is probably a social media call out because I think that they know it's something you want to see. Okay. Let me pick this thing up. Hello? So we're doing the social media call out right now. And you're sure he's going to love this?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to do it, but this is disappointing. Okay, here's the deal. We got a social media call out.
Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
Oh, no.
Now, as we lead into this, tell me, is this satire? Nobody wants to admit it, but Isaiah Pacheco and Dameon Pierce could be the 2022 version of Barry Sanders and LaDainian Tomlinson.
It has to be satire.
Is it possible that it's not satire?
Of course, but it has to be satire.
So answer this. Isaiah Pacheco, push the chips in. Where are you at on Isaiah Pacheco? Is there any cold water here?
Yes. I mean, you and I talked about this like a week ago. I feel like we already missed the sell window. I was talking about it. It was like for a while there, Isaiah Pacheco was like, all of a sudden he was going to be the starter and everything. And now it's like he's back to the third or fourth on the depth chart. I mean, look, Isaiah Pacheco was a 7th round pick who was not very successful at Rutgers. And, we expect him to be, Jamal Charles. I don't know. I'm dubious.
Yeah. I don't have anything to add. I've beaten the dead horse here of this backfield. I just, I understand that people are out over their skis with this one. Again, this was the exact analysis I was talking about. It's easy to get behind a guy that you say was forgotten and, misdiagnosed. All the teams missed on him. And again, it's not like he played in a conference that nobody knew about, right? He didn't play in some some religious football conference in the middle of, nowhere in D3. Yeah. Like this was a D1 athlete.
This isn't Julius Chestnut.
Right. This is not Julius Chestnut. Right. So, look, I understand the allure. I understand he was free. My argument was to sell him, to get the value for him before this erodes. Are you in the same mentality? Because.
Should have already sold him for a 23-second. It was there for you.
Okay. But what I'm being told by people that I love in this industry is that it's more valuable to let it play out.
No. I mean, he went from undrafted in your 5-round rookie draft or a 5th-round pick to I can get a 23-second. I guarantee whoever the fuck you take in that 23-second is going to be a better dynasty asset in 1 year from now than Isaiah Pacheco will. Yeah. Mark that shit down.
We're clipping it. I'm clipping it. All right. Dameon Pierce, god of 4th-round picks. Is Dameon Pierce, do you like him anymore?
Oh my God, Dameon Pierce, man. I got to tell you though, now you see all all these guys like DLF guys showing all these trades for Dameon Pierce. The first Twitter mention of Dameon Pierce going for a 23 first was in my league. Ryan Loesch, Real Rhinos, put that out there and got roasted all over Twitter because he gave up a 23 first straight up for Dameon Pierce. And even I was like, oh my God, Ryan, geez Louise. And then the value soared well past that. I've seen trades with like Tyler Algier and a 23 first for him or whatever. Like all this like 23 first plus for Dameon Pierce. So his value is skyrocketing. At this point, if you can sell him for a 23 first plus, you should be doing that. Again, for the same reason as Pacheco. But I will say, unlike Pacheco, I think Dameon Pierce is going to be the starter. I think he's going to have value. I'm not saying he's the same type of player or even situation necessarily, but a little bit like the James Robinson situation where James Robinson was a really good running back on a bad team, but I think he's going to be given the same type of looks and opportunity. And I think he's a good player like James Robinson was. So I think, and he's got 4th-round draft capital instead of undrafted. So he's more valuable going forward than James Robinson was for those reasons that we clearly outlined on multiple pods, including mine with you. But I think Dameon Pierce is a different asset than Isaiah Pacheco by quite a bit.
I love it, man. Well, listen, I need to get you out of here. I
need my money.
We are 2 hours into the show. Yeah, now.
Not surprised.
Not surprising. All right, listen. So I'm going to run the clip, then I'm going to explain the game. This is the part that everybody wants to see. They want to see Nate lose his money.
he misses it. That's impossible. Oh, my God. That is impossible.
So here's how the game works. Listen, I'm sure that you're aware of this. I can never fucking open this thing on air properly. So the way the game works is it's 3rd and 20. You got to get 3 questions right.
Don't get sticky fingers on that case.
You got to get, oh shit, I opened it up upside down. God damn it. I got to put a symbol on this thing. Okay.
Yep, just put a little black magic marker.
It's right there. Like I said, I'm going to send this thing out to everybody. If you win, it's going to get sent your direction. I'm going to sign it, put a headshot in there, whatever you want. So here's how it works. 3 questions, 20 seconds, have to get them all right. 3rd and 20. Are you ready to play the game?
Yeah, this is easy money.
Easy money. Okay, here we go. What size of shoe do you wear?
14.
What team does Tyler Johnson play for?
Houston Texans.
How many regular season 0 touchdown games does Eli Manning have?
12.
The money is safe yet again, ladies and gentlemen. 42 regular season games with 0 touchdowns for Eli Manning.
Wait a minute. You're talking about touchdown passes?
Yeah, touchdown passes.
He's played 42.
42
That's
games
incredible.
without a touchdown. How many regular season 0 TD games does Eli Manning have? Vet me,
That
chat.
feels crazy.
Vet me. Size 14. You know what's funny? Same size shoe. I wear 14 also. How tall are you?
Do you really?
Yeah, how tall are you?
6'4".
Oh, see, I'm 6'1.5". It's a curse. Flat
Holy
feet.
smokes.
It's just the worst. It's just the worst situation in the world.
Jesus.
Yeah, I didn't get blessed with the height though, bro. You're 6'4". God, shout outs to you. Yeah. So I'm probably gonna get vetted by the chat here in a minute. So we'll let them do their thing. But Scott, man, I appreciate it. Listen, again, I truly do mean it. I think that you have a rare skill set in the industry. I think your voice is powerful. I think your takes are well informed. You have fun. You can play the call people out game, which to me is kind of how I came up playing the troll game. So, and of course, the whole crew that you've got going over there is excellent. You guys put out great content. So tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah, just undroppables.com. At the Undroppables, you can find me on Twitter at Dino Game Theory. And don't forget to check my podcast, which is Undrafted, The Undrafted. So yeah, come check it out. If you search The Undroppables on any podcast, you'll find all of our, iTunes or whatever, you'll find all of our podcasts. So yeah, check us all out.
Love it, man. Please do. Everybody in the chat, hit the like button before you go. Let's get a couple more likes on this thing on your way out. That's it, guys. Thanks for checking it out. This was a hell of a stream, 2 hours and 10 minutes. I took way too much of Scott's time. I did not expect it to go this long. But thank you, everybody, for coming out. Appreciate the chat. Appreciate you, Scott. And we will be back next week with Ryan McDowell. Woo!